You might want to pull out 15, introduction of the new program.
No, he's going to do it. Okay, I'd like to introduce everybody, or welcome everybody, I'm sorry, to the San Benito County Board of Supervisors regular meeting for May 6, 2014. If you'll stand with me, we'll be led on the pledge by Supervisor Barrios.
Okay. Ready, salute, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I can have a motion for certificate of posting?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. And if I can have a motion to ratify all of our proclamation and certificates?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? And they passes 5-0. With that, I guess the first one will be proclamation recognizing the month of May 2014 and Mental Health Month in San Benito County.
That'll be Mr. Chair. I'll be- Here you go. My fellow board members and fellow community members of San Benito County, we'd like to proclaim May as mental health in San Benito County, whereas thousands of individuals and families across the United States have and will experience symptoms of mental illness, and whereas mental illness can affect people of every race, ethnicity, gender, religious, and social economic group in our society, and whereas the month of May is annually recognized nationally and throughout our state as Mental Health Month in celebration of the efforts to eliminate social stigma attached to mental illness and to provide help and recovery. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the San Benito County Board of Supervisors, in recognition of the importance of eliminating the social stigma attached to individuals experiencing mental illness and embracement of the concept that individuals who experience mental illness can recover, do hereby resolve that the month of May 2014 is Mental Health Month in the County of San Benito.
Thank you. Appreciate it. If I can just take a moment and share a few words. This year for May is Mental Health Month. Of course, we've been doing this every year for quite a while. It's a day that's recognized, a month that's recognized nationally. And so on Friday, May 9th, we have some activities planned as part of our May is Mental Health Month celebration at our Esperanza Center. And our Esperanza Center is our drop-in center. It was funded through the Mental Health Service Act, Proposition 63. So the Esperanza Center is at 544 San Benito Street. It has been open for quite a few years, so I invite you all to stop by. From 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock is when the activities will take place. We're going to have a client art show. We're going to have a raffle, and there's been some things that have been donated that we'll raffle off. And along with that, for the entire month of May, we're doing a social media campaign, and the focus is suicide prevention. And we're doing this in conjunction with Family Services of the Central Coast, and we'll be running static ads over at the cinema, and that'll have a suicide prevention message. And we're also running some ads at some bus shelters, and I understand one of them is already up over by Hazel Hawkins Hospital, so you'll be seeing those as well. So that'll be part of our social media campaign. So I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next proclamation is to the Monterey Bay Unified Air Pollution Control District, declaring the month of May 2014 as Clean Air Month. I'd like to read the last couple of whereases on this. Whereas, along with the Monterey Bay Unified Clean Air Pollution Control District, San Benito County Board of Supervisors commitment to environmental protection and public health results in some of the cleanest air in the nation. And whereas increased public awareness effort during the month of May and throughout the year will promote actions by the County of San Benito citizens and businesses that will keep the air clean. Now therefore be it resolved that the San Benito County Board of Supervisors recognize May 2014 as Clean Air Month and encourage all citizens to join in the effort to live and work in ways that will ensure cleaner air, better health for our communities.
Thank you, Supervisor Munzer, and thank you, Board of Supervisors. My name is Anna Rourke, and I am actually the Executive Assistant to Richard Stedman, who is the Air Pollution Control Officer for the Monterey Bay Unified Air Pollution Control District, who very much regrets he could not be here this morning. He enjoys coming to these meetings and talking about clean air. He is actually in Atlanta, Georgia at a national, I always have to read this, National Association of Clean Air Agencies. So he is still busy working on our behalf. It's a pleasure and an honor to receive this proclamation on behalf of the district. Spring is the beginning of our ozone season, but the winter months are also very much impacted in air quality due to the burning of wood smoke. So actually at the district, every month throughout the year is a clean air month for us. But every year we like to take the month of May to especially recognize air quality and to recognize our partnership with the cities and counties that we work with through the district in maintaining the great air that we all are able to enjoy. We'd like to thank San Benito County and its citizens for being a part of the district, and thank very much for this proclamation that shows the support and continuing work that we all do to continue the furtherance of our quality of our air. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann. Next, we'll move on to the proclamation declaring May 2014 as Foster Care Awareness Month in San Benito County.
One of my favorite people right here, Angie. You can turn around so that the public can see you. Foster children are near and dear to my heart. I have the pleasure of sitting on the Hollister Youth Services Council and have worked with Angie for many years. And so at this time, I would like to proclaim May as Foster Care Month, whereas the family serving as the primary source of love, identity, self-esteem, and support is the very foundation of our communities and our county. And whereas in San Benito County, there are over 75 children and youth in foster care on a monthly basis, being provided with safe, secure homes. And whereas foster families and relative care providers give these children nurturing, compassion, and support, and whereas there is greater need for more foster families. Therefore, be it resolved that the San Benito County Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim the month of May 2014 as Foster Care Month in San Benito County, and urges all citizens to volunteer their talents and energies on behalf of children in foster care, foster parents, and the child welfare professional staff working with them during the month and throughout the year. And I do want to especially thank the staff because you do a wonderful job in providing a lot of great services. So in witness of the approval of this proclamation by the San Benito County Board of Supervisors on this 6th day of May 2014. Thank you for all you do. And Angie, thank you for your volunteering and all the hard work. She's a great representative for San Benito County.
She has a few words.
Okay.
Go ahead. Let me just say something. Foster youth are my heart. And when they are here to speak, I would like to just step back and let them talk with you.
Hi, my name is Angie. I'm part of the CYC Council for South County, and currently we're trying to move the South County to Hollister. And what CYC is California Youth Connection, which is based on foster youth having a voice. And currently we have worked on sibling visitation rights, Caregiver Act, and also recruitment for our Hollister chapter.
And may I say one more thing? Oh, thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
I want to recognize Angie and other students in our area and in Santa Clara County because they have come together to try to bring together foster youth. But they have gone to the extent of going to Sacramento and representing other foster youth and talking to our representatives there for change in legislation to bring additional support their way. So thank you, Angie, for that effort and all the other students as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
And last but certainly not least, we're declaring May 18th through the 24th as 2014 as a National Public Works Week.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you doing? On behalf of the Board of Supervisors, it's my great honor to give you this proclamation for National Public Works Week. And as we all know, Public Works is one of the most important departments in the county for all the citizens, and it impacts us every day. We look for our roads to be well maintained, the sides of the roads mowed and trees trimmed, not to mention that our public works employees work long hours, whether it's hot, cold, rainy, and we certainly appreciate that. And so I'm going to read the whereases for this very important week. Whereas public works services provide in our community are integral part of our citizens' everyday lives, whereas the support, understanding, and informing the citizens is vital to the efficient operation of the public works system, and programs such as water, sewers, streets, highways, public buildings, and development review, whereas the health and safety and comfort of the community greatly depends on these facilities and services. Whereas the quality, effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction is vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of public works officials. And whereas the efficiency of qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform. Now, therefore, it be resolved and proclaimed that San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors does hereby recognize the week of May 18th through the 24th, 2014 as National Public Works Week. Congratulations. Thank you, Armand.
Anthony. Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Board. I also have another whereas I would like to add. It says, in order to continue our civilized lifestyle, a great deal of work is accomplished on a daily basis by public works crew and staff. This includes fixing our road and bridges, our infrastructures, overhead and underground, and sometimes these efforts, which make our life easier and safer, go unnoticed. On behalf of Public Works staff and crew, I would like to thank the board for this recognitions, and we do have a poster here that it will be displayed at the entry of this building, so for the May 18th through May 24th. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All
very
right,
much.
very good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to public comment. This is an opportunity to address the board on any item of interest not appearing on the agenda. No action may be taken unless provided by Government Code Section 54954-2. And each speaker will be limited, including translation, to 3 minutes. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes. Celia Marfa.
Buenos días a todos y gracias a los supervisores por venir a acompañarnos a este meeting y gracias a todas las personas que nos acompañan esta mañana. La razón que venimos y nos juntamos a este meeting es para que se den cuenta lo duro que trabajamos por tan poco dinero. Tenemos la paciencia para soportar todo lo que venga de parte de nuestros clientes. Somos amables, respetuosos y sobre todo muy responsables. Es por eso les rogamos nos den un aumento que de verdad merecemos Y yo les agradezco a todos este día por este meeting y quiero que sepan que nos pueden visitar cuando estamos cuidando a nuestros clientes para que se den cuenta lo duro que trabajamos y cómo tenemos ese respeto y esa responsabilidad hacia nuestros clientes, la manera en que los cuidamos y los tratamos, para que se den cuenta que lo que ganamos no es suficiente para nuestras familias y sí quisiera pedirles de corazón que nos ayudaran a este aumento de sueldo. Gracias por venir a este meeting.
Did you understand, or do I need to translate? Okay, thank
We're
you.
fine. Okay.
I will go quicker.
Terry Sandoval.
That's me. I'm not going to speak.
Okay. Mersha Sharon.
Muy buenos días, honorables señores. Mi nombre es Mirza Sharon Mondragón. Yo represento a la voz de aquellos hermanos ciudadanos que están en coma, de ellos que tienen los mismos derechos que ustedes diplomáticos no han querido apoyar. Nosotros que cuidamos enfermos exigimos respeto, exigimos mejores salarios, atenciones médicas, necesitamos un aumento de sueldo. Nosotros que cuidamos enfermos hacemos el trabajo que hace una enfermera a una institución. Una enfermera solo por tomar la presión, la temperatura y medir el oxígeno a un enfermo les cobra hasta $400. Nosotros bañamos a los enfermos, les cambiamos un pañal hasta 4 o 5 veces al día. Nosotros les damos de comer, sufrimos igual que ellos, le lavamos su ropa, una labor que ustedes los representantes no han valorado. Este condado de San Benito tiene el orgullo de ser la tierra del presidente Reagan, pero a nosotros nos tienen en la miseria. Medical nos niega todos los derechos, se niega a ayudar a los enfermos en su rehabilitación, argumentando que nunca hay fondos. Para todo, nunca hay fondos. Estados Unidos es el país más rico del mundo, pero es una vergüenza que a nosotros nos tengan limitados. A los enfermos les niegan un derecho y yo soy la voz de ellos. Ellos no pueden decir, tengan piedad de nosotros. Ustedes, grandes dignatarios, escúchenos, grandes diplomáticos, les pido que vengan ustedes y limpien a los enfermos, ayúdenos a cuidarlos. Ustedes ganan mucho dinero y nosotros nos pagan una miseria y nosotros nos llenamos nuestras manos de suciedad, de orines, y eso no es justo. Nosotros necesitamos ayuda. Muchísimas gracias y espero que no se sientan ofendidos por decirles la verdad, pero necesitamos el apoyo de todos ustedes. Muchas gracias.
Norma Gutierrez.
Buenos días, soy Norma Gutiérrez y él es mi hijo, Saturnino Gutiérrez, y estoy aquí por lo mismo para pedir un sueldo digno, para vivir con dignidad, porque ya tiene limitaciones mi hijo y no puede tener más limitaciones de las que ya tiene económicamente, no puede tener porque ya es suficiente con las que ya tiene. Entonces les pido su comprensión para que nos ayuden a tener un sueldo mejor. No me gusta estar aquí pidiendo, no es nada agradable estar pidiendo ayuda, pero lo hago por él, porque en un futuro yo no voy a poder cuidar a mi hijo. ¿Quién va a querer ir a limpiar pañales y todo por $10, $10.50? Me imagino que no. Nadie va a querer hacer mi trabajo. Yo lo hago con todo mi corazón. Igual lo hiciera con sueldo y sin sueldo, pero estoy luchando por él. No voy a poder siempre estarlo cuidando. Y necesito que él tenga una vida digna y justa y un cuidado de calidad. Gracias. Les pido su comprensión y su ayuda.
Berlin Martinez.
Good morning. My name is Belen Martinez. I take care of my daughter with love, dignity, that no one can. We, as home care workers, need an increase in wages so we can continue doing this difficult job. By doing this this job, we as home care providers are saving a lot of money to the state of California. Thank you.
Jesus Rodriguez.
Good morning, dear Board Supervisor. I'm here to speak for those people they cannot speak on, they are not here. And when they have all the 24 hours taking care of their relative, grandpa, mothers, children's, 24 hours, and they get paid only $10, $10, and it's not fair. It is not fair because the people, our people, they need a quality life. It is a fair that he get a raise, the salary, because they cannot live with the $10. Who can live with the $10 in this time, when everything is going up? Everything is we pay too much money for everything, even for the gas. 1 gallon gas, what is that, $4, 5 cents? So they take the idea how we can survive. So that's why we are here, to asking you to help our people, our families, our relatives, our children. They deserve a quality life like everybody else. Please, touch your heart. Think about others. And we need you. We can work, we can live, we can progress together, because we are human also. And we know that you guys have a great heart, and we need your help. So please, don't forget our poor people. They deserve a quality life, a dignity life, like everybody else. Thank you very much.
Marvin Jones.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Chairman, Board, hey, you remember your oath of office? Specifically, the section there where you will defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, emphasizing domestic enemies of the Constitution. Remember that sentence in your oath of office? If you get out the little booklet I gave you that's got the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, you turn to page 44. That's where you'll find the Fifth Amendment. We're familiar with it. That's the one where you cannot testify against yourself, can't be tried twice, several other things. It also says you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the process of law. That's the Due Process Clause. And shall not have private property taken for public use without just compensation. Bureau of Land Management took your county roads, put a gate up, locked it. There was no due process. There was no just compensation. We've got Memorial Day coming up in 3 weeks. You've got one meeting between now and then. You going to honor your oath of office, or are you just going to roll over and let some bureaucratic government organization take your property, your county property? Your oath of office, remember that. Defend the Constitution against domestic enemies. You've got one. Come up with a resolution to open county property out at the Bureau of Land Management, Clear Creek area. I better stop. Thank you.
Dean Murphy.
Good morning. My name is Dee Murphy, and I wanted to come to remind you about our letter of no confidence against BLM's Rick Cooper. I have one question. I wonder where the letter goes. I kind of missed that part before. And I want to thank you for all you have done. I know way back in the back, you guys actually work a lot harder than we see, and I really appreciate that because I've been doing this for 4 years, 5 years. They closed it, what, May 2nd, 2008, so it's 6 years, my temporary closure, as he calls it. That's no more than 2, is now 6. 6? Sorry. You guys do a really good job. Let us know so I can get all my people to come down, because they thought it was today, so they actually had people ready to come. Because, you know, I know we gave you guys a standing ovation a couple years ago, and you deserved it, because what you did is you opened that road that they illegally closed. Now I want Clear Creek open, because all the BLM does is take away, as you can read in the paper, more and more every day. They just close some more land. They want to make more of the desert wilderness. Well, that just cuts out everybody. It doesn't open up anything by taking away land. What it does is takes it away, locks people out. Nobody walks in the desert. I've ridden my dirt bike there. I've never seen one walker except when they have a dirt bike and it broke down. Everybody rides, drives, rides a horse. Nobody hikes. Clear Creek, same thing. That's the best thing we got. You know, Clear Creek is number one. Everybody knows about that. Doesn't matter where you're from. If you're a dirt biker, you absolutely know about it. It's like Hollister Hills. We have people that ride off trails. You know, we try to get them to stay. You have one bad apple, it ruins it for everyone. And that's our bad apple over there in the Hollister BLM office, as you know from when I came earlier last month. Thank you for what you do. I really appreciate it. Let us know, and we'll pass the word. Let Steve Wells, me, and E.T. know, Ed Tobin. Thank you.
Marty Richmond.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Marty Richmond from Hollister. I had a different subject, but we're going to change right midstream here. One of the first political fights I had here when I started annoying everybody was over at the city, because they allowed only 2 minutes for public comment, and you would make a 2-minute comment and then you'd have a 20-minute rebuttal from every member of the panel, which I thought was unfair. And I always said that 2 minutes was not enough time to make your case. I'm going to disagree with you, Mr. Chairman, or whoever's in agreement with the chairman. You should give these folks who only speak Spanish a reasonable time for translation. Maybe not twice the amount of 3 minutes, but you should give them a little time so they could at least have someone talk about, maybe not word for word, but if they select to translate a gist. I understand they're going to be at every meeting. I understand it's going to draw it out, but they have a right to be heard, and the public has a right to hear what they have to say if they can't, even if they can't speak English. So I disagree with you, and I do disagree with many of their points. The fact that they make $10.50 here and $11.70 in Santa Cruz, as a percent of the income, they're actually making less money in Santa Cruz than they're making here, okay? Because Santa Cruz County has a heck of a lot of income. And so they're actually, as a percent of what the Santa Cruz County is paying per hour, they're doing actually better here. We're giving up more of our revenue than Santa Cruz County. So I disagree strongly with some of their points. I disagree less with some other their points, but I want to take this opportunity to disagree with the board, and you should give them a reasonable opportunity to make their point with a translator so that the public can hear what they say, because of all the freedoms we have, the freedom of speech means the freedom to communicate your grievance. Thank you very much for your time.
Is there anyone else that'd like to address the board at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to department head announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we do have a few announcements this morning. The first announcement that we have relates to one of the topics that was just discussed, and that's with regards to the letter of no confidence. Last board meeting, your board requested us to create a letter. We will be coming back to your board. We're in the process of working on our budget, We're looking at the Optimity performance evaluation as well as an ERP. So we have a lot going on in the next month, but we'll be bringing that back to you. Well, our plan is to address Sally Jewell, Secretary of the Interior, Department of the Interior, as well as Neil Quartz, Director of BLM, Congressman Sam Farr, Congressman Bob Bishop, House of Natural Resources Committee, Congressman Doug Hastings, as well as Rick. So those are the individuals that we plan to send that off to. Just want to let the board know that. One thing, though, we did want to make sure as well, tying into that, is we did file a statement of reason or appeal on May 2nd with regards to the gate closure. Just wanted to make sure the board was aware of that, too. We also do want to do a follow-up with you with regards to TOT and TIBIT. I've asked Sarah, our management analyst in administration, to give you a quick update as to where we're at and when we're coming back to your board. Sarah?
Good morning, everyone. Just to let you know, the owners, overnight establishment owners, luckily had another meeting in mid-April. They were able to gather some people that were not able to attend the previous meetings from February, so that's great. Those who couldn't attend did let them know their interest in being there. They just couldn't attend at that time. An agreement amongst them is that they do want to work together amongst themselves as long as with all of you, but they do feel that focusing on overnight establishments alone is too narrow, and more could be done if everyone paid their fair share. So they would like to see a larger group involved in the T-bid, perhaps wineries and restaurants. They've also asked that to discuss their options and the likelihood for an increase in the TOT with the supervisors, so that item will be brought back to all of you, hopefully June 17th. In addition to that, I'm going to provide a small update on the TOT. We do have a schedule of events. The deadline, in order for us to increase it at all, would be the revised ordinance, and the resolution would have to be presented to you at the August 5th meeting. Again, with the budget and everything going on, there's just a little delay, but fortunately we did leave enough time in that gap for the public hearing and arguments to be heard. So we hope to come back to you sometime in June.
Thank you, Sarah. We also have some good news coming out of our Public Works office. I have our interim director, Armand, here, interim or assistant planning Public Works Director, excuse me, Armand, and as well as Adam here to give you some news that we received.
Good morning again, Armand, Public Works. I would like to bring to your attention that our county is one of the award-winning recipients for our one-stop center building project at 2301 Technology Parkway. At this point, I would like to ask Adam Goldstone to come forward and fill you in on this great award-winning project.
Good morning. San Benito County was recently honored by the California Counties Architects and Engineers Association with the Small County Public Project of the Year award for the Sheriff Administration / County Permit Center in Hollister. Counties were honored for their achievements in the areas of municipal public projects that contribute to the overall community, were environmentally sustainable, provide enhancement to their workforce, and contribution to the local economy. As one of 3 counties receiving the award, San Benito County was selected based on an 8-part evaluation of such criteria as value cost savings, community and employee enhancement, aesthetics, sustainability, innovation, creative funding, and public-private partnerships. Rob Unholtz, president of the CCAEA, said this project represents the best that public sector architects and project managers do every day for their communities, and we are delighted to bestow this award in recognition of their efforts. The California Architects and Engineers Association is a nonprofit service organization that supports municipal public sector architects, engineers, and capital project staff all across California. The mission of the CCAA is to provide interpersonal networking and professional development opportunities, exchange knowledge and information, and promote professional development of the California County architectural and engineering professionals. The CCAA Annual Projects of the Year is celebrating its inaugural year and is proud to bestow this award on our esteemed colleagues. And there's the trophy we were presented with. I just wanted to share that with you.
Supervisor Barris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to congratulate staff because I know this couldn't have been done without your efforts. You did a wonderful job. I remember about 4 years ago, Supervisor Botello and I were sitting in the Facilities Committee trying to figure out what are we going to do. We need to do something. There was the availability of this building. We were thinking of renting, of leasing. We finally made the wise decision that buying it would be the best way to go and save us money in the long run, and look at where we're at now. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Botello?
Mr. Chairman, it was just a real good move on the county board's part to move forward with that project, and we were very fortunate that to have a facility that's served this community for a very long time and for a relatively reasonable price, which is very difficult in times like these. But congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you all for your support on this project.
I too just want to echo that. Congratulations and
Thank you.
Job well done.
Thank you.
That concludes our announcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Aman.
Thank you, Adam and Armand. We do have another announcement. This will be coming out of our probation department. We're excited to have a new CPO, or Chief Probation Officer, in our county, recently hired. Ted, I'd like you to go to the podium and introduce yourself. He has years of experience in the probation department, and we're excited to have him on board. Thank you, Ted. Ted?
Thank you. I'm always confronted by a podium that's bigger than me. Honorable members of the board, words cannot really express the gratitude I feel for this opportunity. I've spent nearly 20 years in the probation profession, and in that time, I've worked to improve the lives and condition of everyone around me, which would be the staff I work with, the clients we serve, and the community we serve as a whole. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity and to fulfill the trust and faith placed in me by the members of this community. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Welcome, and we too look forward to working with you.
All right, thank you, Ted Baran. That is all the announcements that we have out of the
We'll
offices.
move on to board announcements. Supervisor Rivas? Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. At the last intergovernment committee, there was discussion that both the city and the county should consider a joint mission to fill the public works position. Supervisor Barrios and Mayor Velasquez will look into it and report back to the intergovernment committee and see if this time, if there's any possibility that we can go in that direction. And I guess the purpose is, one, provide efficiency at a lower cost per unit. That was one of the items, and there were some other items, but I felt that that was a good one for us to talk about right now. The other one is we attended the Vets Commission meeting last night, and the skateboard park through Sarah, she's not here, made some modifications, went back to county council, and kind of hashed things out. And I knew that that was one of the concerns that my fellow director Munzer had, and as I did too. And it seems like we were able to reach some consensus in terms of adding and deleting some of the language that still need to go back before the city council and before back to county council, and eventually come back to the board of supervisors for full consideration. So we're talking about a month and a half from now to 2 months. My wife and I attended along with Supervisor Rivas and Supervisor Barrios, the annual maize function. I just want to report that it was a well organized function. It was great. To hear the stories of the kids benefiting from the scholarships that they received was wonderful. Over 500 students have benefited with over $400,000 of community contributions. Thank you, committee. Community, you guys did a good job to help these kids pursue their educational career. Thank you very much. That concludes my report.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I have a question about
the supervisor's first recommendation. I think that the intergovernmental the committee is a great thing. You know, it's a great opportunity to toss around new ideas. But rather than direct you know, because when we talk about a potential a consolidation of and this concept of bringing the public works departments from the city county, it's a big undertaking. I don't want to, you know, prior to assigning staff members to research it and work on that, that's staff time, that's our county money. I think that it's important that we agendize the issue for our board to see if that's the direction we even want to move in. You know, you know, like I said, I appreciate the intergovernmental, the committee, but at the same time, I think it's a committee that's doing too much, and it's starting to have an impact on our resources here, our very limited resources at the staff level. And so I think when we talk about such an important issue as this intergovernmental cooperation and you know, a consolidation, we need to have that discussion at our board first, and then you know, I think that's the appropriate step. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I just want to say I concur, Supervisor Rivas. So we'll move on. Supervisor Barris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, those are such huge decisions. So I know that Mayor Velasquez and I have both been appointed to go forward. But before we do anything, we have actually asked our CAO and the manager, city manager, to really come together and talk about it themselves to see what are the pros, what are the cons, do we even want to move forward before we bring it back to the Board of Supervisors, because there's no point in moving forward if you don't have the consensus that we need in order to do this. So you're absolutely right, and I think that is a good direction for us to take. So, yeah. And our CEO may want to say something in regards to that.
Mr. Chair, hold on, right. And Mr. Chair, the intent of the intergovernmental committee, it's more of a exploring ideas, option, going back to the full board. No decisions will be made before it actually comes to this board for full discussion, and to the city council and to the San Juan Bautista too. Yeah. It's just ideas. We get together, discuss ideas, and then take them back to our respective body and see if the body does embrace the idea. If it don't, then it dies at the board level.
Yeah. Mr. Chair.
Okay,
yeah, and actually that was the plan. We were going to discuss that soon, and then at that point I'll bring it back to your board, and then we can discuss our recommendation to your board.
Okay. 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 Yeah. Supervisor Barris, do you want to go ahead with your announcement?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And well said, Supervisor De La Cruz, regarding the Mexican-American Committee on Education. We celebrated 44 years of successful fundraising for college-bound students in San Benito County. And the nice thing about that is a lot of those students have come back to us to give back to this community, and that's a great thing. And I want to give kudos to our Supervisor Rivas, because he represented us well and really pointed out a lot of things. I learned a lot that night that I really didn't know about San Benito County. And but anyway, thank you for the good representation. I also attended probation department. They had the juvenile work service graduates. We had about 35 graduates. They're the first-time offenders that are given community service. And Ted rolled up his sleeves. He was already there, and actually he started working before he even came on board. And honoring those students and making sure that they are successful. So that's a wonderful program that the probation department offers. I also went to Monterey and attended the welcome event for our new Red Cross Executive Director representing Monterey County and San Benito County. Well attended. Business Council was there, and other community members. And that's it. Thank you so much. Oh, one more thing. I just looked at my notes. I want to thank Jim Riding-Sword for continuing the effort in addressing the homelessness issue. We are moving forward with a lot of planning and thoughts and ideas, and we had a meeting yesterday, and well attended by community members, HHSA, the mayor, City of Hollister, and other interested community members. So that is moving forward in a very positive direction in trying to find means, ways, and opportunities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Patel?
Yes, I want to express a level of gratitude to a special event that we had in San Juan Bautista last Saturday. The Rotarians from the whole region participated in a beautification project at the what they call the Orchard behind the plaza on 3rd Street, downtown San Juan Bautista. They whitewashed the fence, kind of cleaned up the what they call the orchard, and put a sprinkler system in, walking trails, and what the goal was is to make it more friendly to people visiting the community and also more usable for us that live there. And along with that, besides the Rotarians from San Juan Bautista, Morgan Hill, Gilroy, Hollister, which there was about 80 people participating in the project, my sisters from the Native Daughters Power 179 provided breakfast. The city of San Juan provided lunch with the city manager, Roger Grimsley, doing the barbecuing, and it was quite an event. Then the next day, as I mentioned, we had Peak Day, the annual flag raising on the last Sunday of April, hosted by the San Juan veterans. And we had veterans from throughout the whole Monterey Bay area as well that came up and enjoyed kind of a cool day up there. It wasn't one of your better spring days, but we had a great time, great barbecue, and the Native Daughters also participated in that. What I didn't realize during the presentations, this is something I didn't know too much about, but doing my research now, is that the veterans made a special mention that May 1st was Loyalty Day, which is kind of a reaffirmation of loyalty to the United States and recognition of our heritage of American freedom. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the flag raising on Fremont's Peak. So it was a great day and a lot of fun. And I see our San Bernardino County Water District Executive Director, and he's be on the agenda a little bit later in this morning. Supervisor Barrios and I attended an intergovernance committee meeting, and I guess the water projects for the city of Hollister and Sunny Slope is moving along very well, on schedule and on budget so far. And also the Water District is initiating a water assessment needs, and maybe I hope that Jeff will talk about that a little bit later on in the meeting. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. I'd like to announce that we have a long agenda today. We definitely have an afternoon session. Hopefully, we'll get a lunch break. And when we do, I want to encourage everybody. Running Rooster is cooperating with the our local United Way organization for their Eat, Drink, and Live United. And I would encourage everybody to take their lunch break at Running Rooster today, because part of the proceeds will go to our local United Way. And also, I have received some phone calls and some emails. Apparently, there's some issues in San Bernardino County with Coverage California, Anthem, Blue Cross, and the doctors not accepting new patients. So I would ask that our CAO agendize that, have the appropriate agencies here to address that to us, that we can see what's going on with health coverage and Coverage California.
I'll make sure to agendize that.
Thank you. Supervisor Barris?
Mr. Chair, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to say one more thing, because this is really important. Tonight, well, since midnight last night to, I believe, midnight tonight, there's an effort to raise money for San Bernardino County and nonprofits. So all of us have the opportunity to call in, and you can look for it online. It's called Silicon Valley Gives, where San Bernardino County will be matched $100,000 by an anonymous donor. So you can call in and give whatever amount you can to the nonprofit of your choice. I will be doing that, and hopefully we will get that extra $100,000 for San Bernardino County nonprofits. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to consent agenda. I've been asked to pull item 22. Is there any other items from the board that they would like to pull? Is there any item from the public that they would like to have pulled? 22. Seeing none from the public, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
We have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 22.
Mr. Chair, the reason that I brought that up, and I want to make sure I'm on the right page here. Yes, I am. This is a $50,000 permission, so to speak, from the board to the Public Works, which I don't have a problem making sure that we secure enough fuel for our vehicles and for everything that we need to do. The only thing is that in the past, we have not exceeded, we have given even our CAO and other directors a $10,000 limit. And so I need to know the rationale behind this. It's a lot of money, and I'm just a little uncomfortable with it.
That's a good question. Originally, when we had, I guess, designated road commissioner, their limit goes up to 25,000. And this is part of the road operational actually work that we continually buying fuel for our equipments, and in order to be able to service all our roads on a daily basis. And before our road commissioner was able to basically sign off on this, and the reason right now we don't have a road commissioner per se at this point, which compel us to bring it before the board to actually get permission for purchasing fuel for next coming months. And I think there is an item on the agenda on May 20th to appoint a new road commissioner, which would alleviate this type of requisition.
Okay, now does it have to be, couldn't we just keep the same amount that the commissioner had before?
Yeah.
Now it's double?
No. Actually, this is, we don't buy $50,000 worth of fuel. We buy 25,000 at a time.
Okay, so you try to get the best price that you can from local suppliers, I'm assuming.
Exactly. I have Linda McElroy could actually chime in on the...
Good morning, Linda McElroy, Administrative Manager. Typically, our fuel purchases are handled under the Road Commissioner Authority. As you know, we are without one right now. Our typical fuel purchases are averaging just under $25,000 every couple weeks, and this is only to get us through until a new road commissioner is appointed. Our diesel and fuel costs, like I said, every two and a half weeks are running about $24,000, and if we are to be tied to the $10,000 authority, we're having our one mechanic, and we're currently recruiting for a second, having to solicit 3 quotes every 3 days, and then we have to have the fuel ordered within the 24 hours. It's a tedious process.
Yeah, this is more an efficiency approach to it, and so and this is not ongoing. This will end once we get our full-time.
This will really just give us 2 full tanks of fuel.
Okay.
Allowing us to purchase it at one time.
Okay. Very good. That's a good explanation. Thank you so much. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Omar, is it better to get to enter into a contract over a year, or just go out and see what's on the market?
Linda, you want to say something on that?
Oh, we could pursue that. Other counties do pursue that. Historically speaking, we haven't done that. We have pursued the 3 quotes process every couple of weeks, just to make sure that our local competitors are given a chance. And we do vary our vendors, so locally.
So you do rotate. You don't go with one vendor all the time.
Not typically. Sometimes it does roll to the same vendor if they're giving us a low quote.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Just for clarity, so the board knows, on May the 20th, we're coming back to your board to appoint a road commissioner that'll be handling it, and this will be basically be a moot point at that point. So we'll do away with this. It's just to get us through this period of time for field purchases.
Would anyone from the public like to address this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. $25,000 every couple of weeks, that's $500,000, $600,000 a year in gasoline purchases. Hope you get a good discount. With the competitiveness, what sort of discounts are available? That's a lot of gasoline. A lot of carbon dioxide goes into the air there. But since it's public vehicles and large trucks or whatever, AMBAG doesn't count that as what has to be reduced. But again, it's $500,000, $600,000 worth of gasoline. What's the discount? Thank you.
I'm assuming we're buying it at more of a wholesale price than a
That is
straight
correct.
retail price.
That is correct.
Richard Betancourt, 4140 Southside Road. One of my guys, he does about 120,000 miles a year. His fuel bill is $90,000 a year. So, and that's, I think the average is about $4 a gallon. And I understand through AB 32 that our fuel costs are going to go close to $6 a gallon, so be prepared. This is cheap.
You opened up a can of
I did,
worms.
I'm sorry.
Marty Richmond from Hollis. I cannot resist this this opportunity. Just yawns itself open here, like the mouth of a hippopotamus. You know, during the 1973 fuel crisis, for those of you who were adults during 1973, the effective cost of gasoline, of oil doubled. People say it went up 4 times, but by the time you average it all out, at the refinery level, the cost of fuel doubled during the 73 crisis. If the folks at the Center for Biological Diversity, who are pushing to close all the fracking oil wells in the United States, get their way, the price of fuel will double. That's my estimate. Again, so maybe you should, in the contingency that happens, maybe you should double the amount of money you allow these folks for gasoline. Thank you very much.
I also wanted to add that this fuel operation is not just for public works equipment, it's for all other departments as well.
So when we get a couple more electric cars from the Air District, I don't want to hear any complaints because we'll be saving dollars on our fuel bill. Any other comment from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I hope the electric cars are a lot more efficient than my my golf cart I have on my orchard. It's kind of interesting. I have to throw this out there because it made me think, and it could be my golf cart, is that we plug it in and it charges overnight, and my tenant was complaining about the high electricity bill. It was $200, and they finally figured out that it was the golf cart that was drawing the electricity. When we unplugged it, his bill went down to $60.
Oh my God.
So I think I'm going to have to get rid of the electric cart, but I hope our cars are better than that. Anyway.
Well, did you buy that from Mr. Edison?
I don't know. It's an old electric cart.
All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
I will make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve the open purchase requisition for Public Works fleet fuel purchases in the amount of $50,000 and authorize the CAO to make purchases and sign the requisition.
Second.
We have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Can't win for losing.
You can't. No, you can't.
Let me see where we... With that, I guess we will move on to our regular agenda. Mr. Espinoza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're on our first item on our regular agenda. This is item number 25. We have our Human Resources Director here, Georgia Cochran, 7. As it says here, I'm just joking. Anyways, we're here to discuss with your board HR reorganization and class specs. So we have Georgia here for that.
Good morning, supervisors. You have kind of a lengthy report in front of you, so let me try to give you some highlights of this. Basically, the firm of Rennie Sloan came in last spring, and I subsequently they came in to do the labor negotiations for the county. I came in a couple months later and have been looking at the HR department and the operations over the last 11 months or so. And there's a number of factors that I've included in this report which are pretty well recognized criteria in looking at a human resources department. And so there's, again, a long, lengthy dissertation of some of that at a very high level. And as this all wraps up, it comes down to some staffing recommendations. And with that, we're asking the board to approve some changes. And one of the confines and difficulties in all of this is how do you do this and get what you need without costing the county and making that cost neutral. And so that's been kind of some of the difficulties. So with that, I believe that this county can function pretty well, meet its HR needs with this proposed structure, which adds a human resources director, returning to, I think, some staffing, a little bit of a model you had maybe 12 years ago or better. And so approving that class spec and the salary, and also then approving a salary for an HR analyst at a journey level. We have a class spec that's kind of a deep class with an entry-level salary. This would be a journey level salary, and that would be kind of depending on how we end up staffing that, and then using the current 1.75 allocations of the HR tax. And I think this, coupled with some changes that took place in HHSA a few weeks ago to try to get some hand-in-glove operations going, as well as as we move forward with the implementation of the ERP system, which will decentralize some of the HR processes. They will still fold through human resources. However, departments would then be able to, rather than carry paper to human resources sorts through the paper, processes that through payroll. This will then become automatic, and we'll start with some larger departments piloting that with respect to a workflow, and which would also give them then access to reporting. So between all of these factors, I think that should get pretty close to the service level that what this county needs. And so with that, I'm happy to address any questions.
Supervisor Bertone?
Yeah, I understand the structure where the staff is recommending going in towards. The question I have is on part of the recommendations is the salary ranges. How do we arrive at those numbers for the department head level? Is that kind of a survey that we did, or how did we get to that?
Okay, well, let me start with the easy one first. That's the human resources analyst. We had a entry-level salary. And so what I did there is up that 10% so that there's a separation without it being extreme. And we believe that will be sufficient. The director was a little bit of a piece of surveying, but also, again, looking at your funding. So there was a little bit of give and take there. So I think even with that, we'll be able to find someone who can fulfill this role. And with that, then what you'll get is full-time staffing and the elimination of a contract that provides you part-time staffing.
Okay. That's it.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I was going to save my comments till a little bit later, but I'm going to have to excuse myself in about 5-10 minutes. And so I see all this reorg stuff, and then I turn to the director of human. I'm assuming it's like the job spec. And
Yes, sir.
again, I've got to be consistent. Education, equivalent to graduation from college with major coursework in public, business, personnel administration, or related field. I have no idea what that means. Equivalent is garbage, in my opinion. And the reason I say this is because, I don't know much about human resources. I myself went through a master's program in public administration, so we touched on the subject. So I just went online to, it was like a human resource director organization. And they say human resource director needs to have a variety of skills in order to perform competently. As an HR director, one must have a fundamental knowledge of all HR objectives, a solid understanding of organization and organizational goal setting, and the ability to diplomatically and confidently suggest and implement change. And so then I looked, what is the common education for HR directors? Educational requirements may vary slightly depending on the company, the area, the organization, and previous work experience. In most organizations, the minimum educational requirement for an HR director is the completion of an advanced degree, such as an MBA with an emphasis in human resources, or a master's degree with an emphasis in management. And I know I'll get the common catchphrase here, oh, you guys have a hard time recruiting. So let's reduce the educational qualification. Let's put someone in there that doesn't have this skill, and they'll learn on the job. I'm not going to accept that. That's why, unfortunately, I probably won't have the opportunity to vote on this. But I think that's garbage. I think that we need to increase that educational requirement to a minimum of a 4-year degree. The last thing I want is to have an HR director here in San Benito County that doesn't have the experience, that's put in a position for political reasons, and I'm just not going to accept that. So if you want to answer to my concern, I'd be glad to hear it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, let me start by saying that's where I started. However, when I look at the department head specs in San Benito County, there is but 1 or 2 that does not have an equivalency pattern. And so to make this different, I couldn't come up with a reason. And there are a number of recognized certificate programs, as well as I have been not here in San Benito County, but in past lives, been dealing with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing and the Equal Employment Opportunity, EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission with respect to that, and have had numerous issues arise where I was forced to change specs to allow an equivalency pattern, and those get looked at pretty seriously. What is an equivalency pattern? Demonstrated success in a role, other coursework. Sometimes you get a person who maybe has an AA degree who has gone on to UC Davis. Sac State has a program. I think Cal State East Bay. I can't remember if San Jose State has this or not, but at any rate, they have programs, there's certificate programs in human resource management as well. So any number of things could make that. It's not designed to just seat time.
Okay, well, that's just something I'm not willing to accept. I can understand that stuff happened in the past. I was elected in 2010, and I'm here to make this county better. And unfortunately, something like this isn't making this county better. I don't want to hire someone that's going to learn on the job. I want someone that's going to be prepared to do a lot of heavy lifting that we need them to do, and to make a lot of organizational changes that we're going to need to make this a better county in the future. I mean, this is an organization that needs significant changes. This is an organization that is slugging along, and we can't do things the way we've always done. And I'm sorry, but we need a HR person that that is going to be able to step into the role of an HR director and get the job done. And I'm sorry, but with the specs that's written, I can't support it. And I just, I'm going to have to excuse myself right now because I have some obligations to attend to. But I hope that my colleagues would push for a stronger educational requirement. I really encourage all of you because this is unacceptable. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments from the board, we'll open it up to the public. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. What's the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chairman, if I could have a couple more questions. Is this basically kind of a, I would think a lot of these personnel guidelines and qualifications is pretty much boilerplate across other counties and cities. Is this pretty much a standard qualification for a department head for an organization of our size?
Of your size, maybe it's probably a little half and half. Obviously, in a larger organization, that might be different. So part of the challenge here is to look at, okay, here's what we have. We have department head specs that appear to be working. Clearly, if you sort applications with respect to quality, quantity, who's got what, this is what you're looking for to rise to the top. But what this does is give the CEO, the board, the widest discretion possible to look at and avoid screening someone out who is a proven leader, has proven experience, and is missing a component, has a number of other things. I mean, it could be the will of the board, obviously, at this point. I think you can get there. I'm not quite sure. I've talked to a few people who may very well be interested. One of them would meet those qualifications. One of them, I believe, has a certificate and an AA degree, which is why I kind of referenced that. Obviously, we haven't recruited yet, but it's trying to find the broadest application possible where you can choose from qualified candidates. And it isn't always just the degree. I'm not anti-education by any stretch, but
No,
it's a matter of flexibility.
I don't think any of us are anti-education, and I'm reading this description as far as being equivalent to a graduation from a college with major coursework in public business and personnel administration and related field. Graduation, are we talking about an AS degree or AA degree, or should we be more specific and be a little bit higher in degree work?
Well, let me give you another example of people I've seen in HR director or leadership positions at that level is someone who has an AA degree, has a certificate, does not have a bachelor's degree, but has completed the Harvard. There's a very intensified leadership program, management program through Harvard University where people spend time back there. They have to come back to their jobs. They do some other things. They go back to Harvard. It's very, very intensive. And at that point, I would be hard-pressed to say that that particular person might not be equivalent. So those are just some examples.
Yeah, and I personally hold work experience to be a big part of it, and that's part of our description as far as the qualifications. So,
Supervisor Barris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Supervisor Botello, because you make a good point that it does talk about extensive, equivalent too, but it also talks about and experience, 5 years experience in responsible personnel administration or closely related fields, including 2 years of experience in a supervisory or lead capacity. So I think this is very broad, which is good. and flexible so that we can get the very best. Because we could, potentially get somebody, and I'm not against education, I think that's the best way, but you could end up with somebody that maybe it's just fresh, meets all the criteria for the degrees, but has no experience, and we certainly don't want to be a training ground for this position. So I will support this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I would support that we gotta have a bachelor's degree in there. It's just, I got my bachelor's in finance and accounting, and I'm thinking of getting my master's in a couple months or so, and I just gotta see, I gotta see some education in there. I gotta support a bachelor's degree on this one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I don't think what Supervisor De La Cruz is suggesting is unreasonable. If you want to try to articulate that qualification.
Well, what I've seen out there, and I know we're not the private business, but what I've seen is we want a minimum bachelor's degree, preferably a CPA. However, if a CPA is not obtainable, then a bachelor's degree with equivalence of years. Those two together would substitute a CPA. So I would like to see a bachelor's degree with years experience on it, so they can come to the table with experience and education behind them. And so that's what I kind of like to see is, and the education part. I can't give the word equivalence here. I do want to see a minimum of a bachelor's degree in personnel administration or a related field. Take out the word equivalence to graduation from college with major coursework in public, and straight out put a bachelor's degree, a minimum of a bachelor's degree required in a related personnel administration or related field. So there's some flexibility if someone has a bachelor's degree and it's not specifically from HR, but the experience part can bring in the HR to the table. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to what Georgia said earlier. You get somebody with an AA, they have gone to Harvard and gotten their certificate in human resources that is extensive on just human resources. I wouldn't want to rule out a person like that, somebody that has had that extensive, the extensive knowledge. And you've done a lot of groundwork, Georgia. I know you have on this, because that was one of the direction we hired you for that reason, to bring us back the very best way that we could have an efficient HR department that could have a lot of planning and direction and good direction. And so I'm going to support you, because I think this is where we need to be with San Benito County, that kind of flexibility, and I don't want to rule out anybody that could be the very best for San Benito County. So thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I will make a motion to approve the class specification for the Director of Human Resources and the position changes as described in the attached staff report.
I'll second that. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay. Deadlock at 2-2. Is there another motion?
I'll make a motion that if we could incorporate the equivalent of, would it be a BS or a BA degree?
I wouldn't specify, because certain schools do BA degrees, others do BSs.
A four-year equivalent degree.
And you get a lot of candidates in human resources who don't have a human resources degree. They have sociology, they have psychology, they have some other major, or it's a concentration from a business program. Those are generally BSs. If you're going to say, if you're concerned with the equivalency, then I would say Supervisor De La Cruz had it spot on, where it would say graduation from college with major coursework in public business, personnel administration, or related field, and not use the words BS or BA, just
Okay. That's the direction. Along with the work experience for a department head level, you have to be in the field. You just can't just come out of college and be a department head. You have to actually work. Yeah, but so how would you phrase that as far as what Supervisor De La Cruz and I kind of feel should be part of their qualification?
Okay, you could education, and then we would strike those first two words and capitalize graduation. I mean, the way Supervisor De La Cruz framed it was very simple, and I think that achieves what he and Supervisor Rivas and you are looking at.
Now, can you refresh my mind what I said?
What did I say?
Okay. If you look at the education, focus on that sentence. So take the word equivalent to, draw a line through that, capitalize graduation.
Isn't it graduated or graduated?
No, you want education where someone has a graduation from college.
Okay.
Is what you're saying.
I think that's as simple as it comes.
Yeah, graduation. Is it graduation for my 4-year? I'm sorry, I want to make sure we get this right.
Okay.
Because we can say graduation. Graduation can mean a certificate. And
I wouldn't call that graduation, but that's okay. Let's do a bachelor's degree.
I guess my question is if this was a 5-member board, we know which way it's going to go.
right.
Do we want to take another couple weeks and get the wording right and then have the full board vote on it? Or do we want to continue?
I think we can do this pretty simply if we say bachelor's degree, education bachelor's degree from a college or university with major coursework in public, business, personnel administration, or a related field.
So move.
Second.
Okay, Georgia, can you repeat that again?
Yes. Bachelor's degree from a college or university with major coursework in public, business, personnel administration, or a related field.
And the related field would include the psychology and...
Let me give you an example for myself. My degree is in civil engineering. It is not in business, public administration, or anything else. Now, I took a lot of business colleges. I have a certificate in human resources management, certificate in labor relations. So if you have someone, they're educated, they have training to show that, and then experience. So that's the reason for using related field. Again, it's that flexibility. If you got someone, I'm not suggesting like me, but if you got a candidate with a similar profile who was just dynamite, to screen them out and say, well, it's not in personnel administration, I think you're going to narrow the field to where you will have difficulty finding someone. Because these folks in HR tend to come from all over. Generally not civil engineering, but...
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion?
Yeah, one more thing. Georgia, if we were to put the "or" after the experience, where we would say education, what you just said, or college coursework in human resources or a certificate in human resources management, and put that up there under education, I can support that. Because then we don't leave anybody out with a potential certificate from a accredited university like Harvard who receives a human resources management certificate to apply and could be a great asset to us. Could we do that? And I would support that.
Give me a second here.
Yeah, I think we're getting to a point where I would feel more comfortable with seeing it written up and rather than just kind of, I would hope that we would all kind of reach some sort of, not a compromise or, yeah, a compromise on this.
The other option is, Georgia, can you bring something back in the afternoon?
Yeah.
With it actually written out?
That's what I was going to suggest. If we can just bring this back in the afternoon, after 1:30, we can bring this, the documentation. So we'll continue this till the afternoon, and we'll supply you something in a written format.
So do we need, what do we need to do with the motion and second? Do we need to rescind them, or?
At some point, you need to take a vote on it, but if the maker of the motion and the second are agreeable to wait until this afternoon, the vote can wait till this afternoon.
I would withdraw my motion for the afternoon consideration.
Concur.
Okay, so then we will continue this item to the afternoon.
Yeah, that's fine. But is my request clear, Georgia?
Yes, I think it is.
It is, because it really pertains to education.
So I'll play around with this, and possibly what you may see this afternoon is, here's option 1, here's option 2 for the board's consideration.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'd like to call for a 10-minute break.
10-minute break.
You know.
this, it's the actual care, so it's not the,
Yeah, and I had a little bag that I got at RCRC.
Oh, cool.
So, because I don't want to just throw it in my purse, because my purse is too much stuff anyway, so I got this little bag. And so it works out really good.
Hey, so next week you're gonna go to.
Yes, are you going to go?
I want to go, so we can
Okay.
sit down together, or whatever.
For the
I was-
legislative conference?
Yeah, for the
Did you get the free
Okay.
sign up from Supervisor Rivas, because he has, oh, are we ready?
Well, yeah, where's Anthony?
Okay. We'll talk later.
We'll talk.
And were you the one trying to call me this morning? Were you the one calling me this morning? Okay, somebody was calling. But I can't tell who was. Find him?
Yeah, I think he was headed for the restroom. Let's cut him off.
I never know which is the recycling and which is the trash. I just put it through.
All right, if we can get going again, Mr. Espinoza, we'll move on to our next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're on item number 26 on our regular agenda. And this particular item has been a concern for the entire state with regards to water and resources. And again, obviously, we're under drought conditions. What we've done today is invited our local water districts, and what we're going to do is get a report back to your board from them, and also discuss a little bit on the county side from an ag perspective, as well as the city of San Juan Bautista. And we'll go ahead and highlight a few things that are going on in that area in Anthony's district. So we want to first go ahead and invite Jeff Catano. He is from San Benito County Water District, and he is the manager there. So thank you, Jeff.
Good morning, supervisors. Okay, so what I wanted to give you kind of is an update from the last time I was here about what the water situation is in San Benito County, and then kind of overall in the state, and mostly in Northern California is where we get most of our imported water from. For the local area, our rainfall this year has been 4.9 inches. And if you remember, our average is 13.1 for this area, so we're significantly below average. Actually at about 37% of what the average is. If you go back this is the third year now that we've had significantly less rainfall than average. If you look, our average rainfall for a 3-year period would be 39 inches. Right now we're sitting at 18. So we're at, I figured, we're below 50%, in each one of these for the last 3 years. So that's, when you have 3 years backed up where you've got less than 50% of your water supply in rainfall, that's a significant deficit. Where that's kind of left us at is that, our local water supply, which is primarily, our groundwater basin and the surface water supplies being Hernandez and Piscinas that we get off of the San Benito River, Hernandez and Piscinas are absolutely empty right now. There is no water in those reservoirs at all. That's normally what we use to augment the groundwater supply in our basin, which really starts up in the Piscinas Valley, then moves through the San Benito River system through Hollister, and then out into San Juan Valley primarily is where that water goes. And normally we'll release water in the spring and the summer to help augment and recharge those. We won't have any water this year, and we really didn't have any water last year to release. We released about 2,500 acre feet. Normally what we'll release in a year is somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 acre feet out of Hernandez, and sometimes up to 10,000 to recharge those basins. What the result of that is that we're starting to see, because of, in addition to that, the shortage of the CVP or imported water, people are relying on their wells more, primarily in agriculture. And what's happening is we're starting to see some drops in our groundwater basin. Last year, if you remember, I told you that we saw there was a 20-foot depression or drop in the groundwater basin in San Juan Valley. We're expecting another 20-foot or more drop this year. We're starting to see some drops along the San Benito River, starting in Piscinas all the way through the city of Hollister and out to the waste, where the city's reclamation plant is. Those groundwater levels are dropping there too. And that's just a result of just no water really going through the San Benito River system to recharge that. Overall, though, the county is actually still in pretty good shape, because when we started this drought period 3 years ago, our groundwater basin, the district had been able to take that imported water and refill our basin and manage it, and we had been keeping the water balance pretty even, balanced with the amount of water taken out with what we were putting back in each year. So the groundwater basin was full. So we're not starting out at a level that, like 1977, where the groundwater levels were like 150 or 160 feet deeper than at what is it at a full basin. We were starting out at a full basin. So we've got a pretty good reserve there, to be able to manage this. For the San Felipe or imported system, we are still at a 0% allocation for ag, and that is not going to change this year. And we're at 50% of what our historic use was for the M&I. That's what you use for the urban area. So, the city of Hollister, Sunny Slope, Stonegate, those folks, that comes from our M&I supply. We're at 50% of historic use, which is, that's a pretty big reduction there too. On the ag side, though, while we got a 0% allocation from the Bureau of Reclamation this year, if you remember what I mentioned to you, that the district was able to store some water in other agencies at outside water banking areas. So we were able to draw that back in this last year. So we did actually have enough water to be able to allocate to our agricultural customers at 30% of what they requested. That's really not enough for most of them to get by to do their normal agricultural operations, particularly if they're in the area along Fairview Road out to Fallon and in that area. Those are the high boron areas, and low producing. Some of those on the eastern side of Fairview, those farms out there have low producing wells. What the result of that is, instead of having 2 or 3 crops a year for those folks, they're having to pull back and do a single crop this year. And so a lot of them have either fallowed their land to be able to move the water to other areas, or they're just doing a single crop with the water that we were able to give them this year. The good news is that the Northern Sierra 8-station index, which is primarily the Northern Sierra area from Shasta down to Folsom, that right now increased from, the precipitation in the beginning of March was only at 30%, 34% of normal. It was very, very low. It was like at 17 inches. We're sitting now at 26 inches, which is about 56% of what the normal amount is. So that's increased significantly. It's not really going to help us this year in getting an allocation, but what it does mean is that there will be some additional water that's in storage for next year, and hopefully we'll get some additional water next year. What it does mean for this year, though, is that there's the North Delta contractors up there along the Sacramento River. There's the settlement contractors is what they're called. Their initial contract allocation that they were getting was only 40%. With this additional rain that we got in March, the Bureau of Reclamation was able to increase their allocation to 75% of what their contract amount is. Well, that's northern Delta. That doesn't directly affect us. What it did do was it provided those folks with enough water that now they've got enough water that they're willing to transfer and sell some of that water to us. So we're going to be able to get some of that water. I've sent out a letter to all of our agricultural customers last week telling them that there is some additional water available. It's not cheap. It's going to be $1,300 an acre foot. But for a lot of folks that are in those high boron areas that have permanent crops, orchards or vines or things that absolutely have to have that water, there's a lot of interest in there. They're willing to pay that, at least on a single year, to be able to have that water to keep their trees alive. So that's kind of some good news. What there is, like I said, some water that's moving around, so that's a good thing. Kind of what I wanted to touch on too was that on the Stonegate issue, because that's all kind of related. Stonegate this year was allocated 96 acre feet. That's 50% of their historic use. Last year, their total water use was 165 acre feet, and that was in a short year. And they actually used all of their water, and then they purchased another about 10 or 12 acre feet of water at the very end of the year so that they could get through, because they'd used up all of their 150 acre foot allocation. At 96 acre feet, 96.7 is what the total was. That's significantly lower than the 165 that they went through last year. So as the district, we were kind of concerned that they were going to run out of water. So we've notified you, some of the Director Munzer, or Supervisor Munzer and Botello, that there was some additional water available that if they wanted to purchase it. The last I heard was that they weren't interested, but in just talking with Ron earlier, they're going to go back and revisit that. They could purchase another 10 acre feet of water, which would give them a 10% increase to what they have to kind of back that up. And it would really cost each one of the homeowners less than $200 for the entire year to have that extra security, to have that water available. If they were really good about using it and they didn't need that water at the end of the year, they can take and transfer that water into next year to make that available to them next year, because next year is going to be a very low allocation here too. I can tell you already, just from what we know about how the system works. So that's kind of the water picture. Supervisor Botello made a comment earlier about the Hollister urban area, a project that we're working on, and yes, we're moving forward with that. We have water for that project, so that because that's going to be an imported water. We have water for that project that I have banked in Southern California, down in Kern County, that we can draw back for that in a year like this when we were short. We didn't bring any of that water back this year because we had enough to be able to operate the less salt plant, so there was no reason to bring that back. And what we're doing, that's kind of our emergency reserve bank account for water down there. But we are moving forward with it. If we can get past the endangered species issues that we've got with that, tiger salamanders primarily. It seems like it's very difficult to understand how an endangered species can have so many sightings of tiger salamanders in our county. It can't be too endangered. But that's, we're working through it. What Supervisor Botello mentioned is that we did the original Hollister urban area study, and that was started about 10 years ago. What we're doing now is we're revisiting the water needs assessment for the next 10 years. So to be able to get a picture of how much the county, the urban area and parts of the county that are in the urban area are going to need, so that we can make sure that we're planning for those water needs and that the water will be here when it's needed. So that's all I have today. If there's any questions,
Are there any questions, Supervisor Patel?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for that was a terrific summary on a very complicated state water, how it's allocated, and so. One of my questions is that we have been in a drought. We're a red area, without question. We don't know when this. Hopefully, it ends this year with the El Nino, but nobody knows for certain. San Juan Valley, the aquifer is in relatively decent shape for groundwater supply. The quality is low, like it is throughout the whole county. But there's other areas in the county, I think that, say, South County, you perk water out of Hernandez. Haven't been able to do that too much the last couple of years. Is that an area that in south of Hollister is more of a concern to the water district as far as a drawdown on the aquifer and something that we should be, or maybe the water district's already keeping a closer eye than other areas that might have a full water table?
Yeah, we do. We go out and we monitor the groundwater levels, particularly out along the San Benito River and through Piscinas. We do that every month. So we get those groundwater levels and we keep track of it. They are starting to drop a little bit, but not to where it's alarming. We are seeing an impact from the very little recharge and the increased pumping.
Okay, and then another question I have with the recycled water is, I know you probably can't put it in the river because of some endangered species, the salmon come up a dry riverbed or whatever, and this perk water is not ideal for them. But is there any thought as far as blending some San Felipe water with treated water to increase the percolation to recharge your aquifers, something
Well,
along those lines?
the way that the wastewater or the wastewater plant works is that they treat the water. It's treated to a very high level, but it doesn't take the salts out. So that's one of the issues, and that's kind of the benefit that we're looking at with this Hollister Urban Area project. Is it'll increase the water quality to the city residents. That will in turn increase the water quality coming out of the wastewater plant. That makes that water more suitable for reclamation, for using for recycled water. But currently what's happening is the way that the disposal process works is that they put it in a percolation pond, so it ultimately ends up back in the basin anyway, which has been a concern of ours for a long time because that recycling process that you get where you put salty water goes to the residents, that goes through their water softeners, comes out even saltier at the back end. You put it back in the basin, and then it's just it's a big loop, which was why we wanted to try to increase the quality of the water coming out of the wastewater plant, and so that you don't get that salt cycle that goes on. Right. But we are doing that. One of the things that it looks like right now that's encouraging to us is that the state has finally woken up to the benefit of recycled water, and it looks like instead of having individual waste discharge orders for a recycle project now, the state is moving toward a general waste discharge order so that you don't have to get a specific order, and so that it'll make it expedite the process for getting a recycled water project off the ground, which is encouraging to us.
Yeah, that really needs to happen too. It's just really too bad that the state has been so slow allowing that to happen. And one last question, CEO mentioned about San Juan and their water issues that they're currently having, and the county has been kind of on the outside edge of observing, these water management issues for the two cities and the water district, of course, and Sunny Slope. Right now, they're down to, I guess, one well, and that's pretty marginal.
Yeah, that's well one, which is the one that's up on San Juan Canyon.
Right.
That's the only one that's not significantly impacted by nitrate. And so they've been relying on that well almost exclusively for like the last 3 or 4 years that I know of. With That well in particular is recharged from water that comes through San Juan Canyon, and with very little water, rainfall this year, it's not surprising that that well has been significantly impacted by, the drought. And so it's not a very deep well. It's only about 150 feet deep, that well is. And it's so that it picks up the water that's coming off of the bedrock underneath San Juan Canyon. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised. The issue that they've got with the other two wells, well 2 and 3, is that those are significantly impacted by nitrate. Well 2, not as much as well 3. But, so they might be able to do something with well 2.
Does the Water District have any plans going forward to maybe assist San Juan in trying to get their treatment plant completed where they could utilize more than one well?
We have had discussions with them about how to kind of work that out with them. The problem they've got is their treatment plant that they've got is a pellet softening plant that does nothing for the nitrate. They're going to have to do something separate for the nitrate issues.
Yeah, and one last comment, Mr. Chairman. I certainly hope that the Water District does try to work with the city as, there's some real good opportunities going forward in the future for economic growth and development in San Juan, and they can't do it without water. And that area, I've been harping on that the west side of our county is very limited in water supply. They have a couple of places, but it probably needs to be treated, and I certainly hope everything works out. And if there's anything I can do to help, I'm certainly there to support the effort. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Jeff, before you leave, with all these emergency declarations that the governor has called, is there any chance of dredging Hernandez now that it's virtually empty to increase the capacity for future years?
It would be hugely expensive. There is mercury that's in the sediments in there, so it would become a hazardous waste to dispose of because of the issues of the water coming out of Clear Creek. So it's not something that that we have even considered. Normally, you don't dredge a reservoir once it's a natural process for the sedimentation to build up in a reservoir. Usually, you either modify the intakes, which we have already done, to raise the intake up, and you just accept the fact that over time there's going to be a loss of some storage. The loss of storage in Hernandez right now is only about 1,500 acre-feet out of the total 18,500 that was originally in the reservoir. So we're still at about 17,000 acre-feet of storage in Hernandez. Very rarely does Hernandez fill and spill, go over the spillway. So the bigger benefit of trying to increase the storage in Hernandez is just not there. It's just it's not economically, it's not worth it.
And what about any future dam sites in the county?
We've looked at a couple of other dam sites at the Water District over time. There's Bird Creek that's down there that we've looked at the possibility of doing them. But at this time, we haven't. There's not the funding for it, and we haven't seen the cost benefit, being there to do something like that.
Okay. All right.
Most of that water ends up coming down through the San Benito River system and recharging our basins anyway. And there's the way that the system operates now, there's very few years when you actually have water that's coming down the San Benito River and it runs so much that it actually leaves the county and goes out through the Chittenden Gap. So it has to be a really wet year for something like that to happen.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jeff.
Any possibility of opening up Hernandez to the public for recreational use?
No. The problem with that is that all of the land around Hernandez is privately held. The Water District only owns the piece of property that's where the dam is actually located, and the property underneath the reservoir itself we actually have an inundation easement on it. We don't own that. So the landowners down there, we just don't have access to, and the agreements we've got for our access to go through those private properties doesn't allow us to have public access through there. The landlord, the people, the landowners that have property around Hernandez can use it, yes. But the taxpayers are getting the benefit from it because they're getting the benefit from the water supply. I know that's been an issue for a long time with folks about recreational access to Hernandez, but it's just the way that it all came out. It's not possible.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor De La Cruz, I think the better question, and I already know the answer to
I
that
know.
too, is how about the public using San Justo?
I know. You know, Jeff, I always ask that.
Just say no, Jeff, and sit down.
Every year I got to ask you that
Right
question.
now, it's not a possibility because we still haven't gotten past the issue of the zebra mussels. If the county were willing to implement a program that would be acceptable to California Department of Fish and Wildlife Service, that those zebra mussels would not likely be transported out of San Justo Reservoir, I think people would be open to looking at that. But it's not easy. You'd have to. It would be expensive to come up with a program like that.
So if we had a closed system where the boats, the fishing tackle, and everything stays inside the park, that would be acceptable as fishing game? Fish and wildlife?
That would be one of the items, yeah. You'd still have to have monitoring because what the risk you run is somebody inadvertently picking up those water out of the reservoir to keep their fish in. They want to they catch their fish, they fill up a bucket of water, or they take that bucket and they go over to Anderson Reservoir, and they use that bucket in Anderson Reservoir, and now you run the possibility of those zebra mussels being transported to another water body. All right.
Thank you, Jeff.
No.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Jeff. We also have Don Reidenhauer from Sunny Slope Water. He's the manager there, and he's going to give hopefully a brief report on the on the water situation.
Yeah, good morning, Board of Supervisors. I'll be very brief. Fortunately, for Sunny Slope, the efforts that San Benito County Water District goes through to recharge the groundwater and to supply us with surface water has us in pretty good shape this year. Our board adopted a resolution declaring an emergency in February, and we are asking our customers to reduce water consumption by 20% this year, but we won't go to a mandatory, or I don't see that in the near future going to a mandatory restriction, and I believe the city of Hollister is in a similar situation as Sunny Slope. We have several water conservation programs in place. We work in partnership with the City of Hollister, San Juan Bautista, and with San Benito County Water District. We have a joint program that's the Water Resources Association. We have toilet retrofit programs. We have high efficiency washer rebate programs. We have water softener rebate programs, and we're looking for this year to have a rebate for replacing your lawn with low xeriscape or low water use landscaping. So we'll be sending out lots of flyers this summer in our water bills. But we're looking pretty good. We're seeing a slight reduction in our surface water supply, and we're going to make that up with use of groundwater. And we are seeing a little bit of drop in our wells, consistent with what San Benito's County Water District's groundwater report showed. But not significant enough to cause us an issue this year. So with that, that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Don. We have our last person. We're going to have Ron Ross, our Ag Commissioner, to give us a report as well.
Good morning, Board. Ron Ross, San Benito County Agricultural Commissioner. I don't have any extra water for agriculture, but I do have some information to be valuable to them. One of the more troublesome items during a disaster, and this is a disaster, the lack of water, is communications. And one of the items is that, where people and businesses can go for financial help during a disaster. And there's often many sources of of assistance available, but trying to find them, how you access them is often troublesome. For agriculture, the California Department of Food and Agriculture has revised their website, and they have one page on their website that has lists all the different programs that's available for agriculture. It would be federal, state, or private. It's just one place where anybody can go to, and there's all the assistance programs that's available for California agriculture. Some of these programs, I mean, everything from farm worker housing to special grants available for organic crops to orchardists who need to replant their trees. This is one place where agriculture can find, what assistance is available. The website is www.cdfa for California Department of Food and Agriculture, and that's www.cdfa.ca.gov. While this information is not going to provide any extra water that we need this year, but it can provide some additional financial assistance to the county's #1 industry. So just want to kind of let the board know and also the public know about one site where they can obtain some help.
Thank you, Ron.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. Before Supervisor Dela Cruz got me off track with the reservoir, Jeff, I want to thank you for your efforts in keeping this board and the county aware of the water situation, especially as it pertains to Stonegate. I really appreciate your efforts there. Also, I've said it before, and I want to take this opportunity to say it again. I think we need to, as a county, look at our ordinance and deal with gray water and see if we can enact some ordinance that would allow the use of gray water in the unincorporated area. And also, I would want to give direction that we would assist both the San Benito County Water District and the Sunny Slope County Water District in whatever they need to get their purple valve waters usable so that it can be used for watering golf courses or parks or whatever the need might be, but be able to actually utilize that wastewater also. So I want to go on record to say that we are willing to work with both agencies and the city of Hollister to bring that about.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and take a look at that. We'll get the we'll look at those ordinances. One other thing I wanted to add to this, as I mentioned earlier, with regards to the city of San Juan Bautista, I received a call yesterday from State OES with regards to the urgency that is occurring right now at San Juan Bautista. They currently have 4 days of water on hand. So with that current well number 1. So what they were going to do is look at the nitrate levels. They did that last night. It looks as though they're going to go ahead and approve the operations of well number 2 because it's right at that level for the nitrate levels. And they're going to be sending out letters to residents within the city limits and letting them know what they're doing. So they're actually going to be, the plan is to turn that on this afternoon and make it operational tomorrow. That's what the plan is, barring any issues. Really, the impact is with regards to infants and pregnant women. That's where this water becomes an issue. So that I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of that we're also working with the state. We're also working with Jan Swigert of California Department of Health drinking water program. So we're working with them as well. So I just want to make sure the board is aware of that. And that's all I had for this particular item.
I guess actually we probably need to open this up to the public. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on this item?
Good morning, Chairman Munzer, supervisors, staff, neighbors. Christina Chavez Wyatt. I'm a San Benito County resident and executive director of the San Benito County Business Council. First and foremost, I do want to say that I'm a client of the Sunny Slope Water District, and I've had them come to my house to do an audit and to help me change out some of my fixtures. And it was really fantastic. They gave me some really good landscaping plans, et cetera, so I highly recommend our residences and business take advantage of their programs and their grant funds they have available. I also got rid of my water softener, which was great. On behalf of the Business Council, also, I want to emphasize the fact that our legislature is looking at a set of about 3 leading pieces of legislation. They're going to be going to the November ballot in the form of a water bond. And right now, a lot of the discussion is the proportion of these funds that are for surface storage, as well as water quality projects, as well as some environmental remediation. I think it's important, although the bills change a lot, they have been amended and changed, that we can work together as a community to tell the state what we want to have in the bond: water surface storage and water quality assistance, including helping out with San Justo, helping out with San Juan Bautista, et cetera, and then also trying to decrease the burden of the bond with all the other environmental projects, because it's really getting too unwieldy, and we wouldn't have a good chance of having it be passed by the electorate in November. Thank you.
Anyone else like to comment on this item? Seeing none, I believe this was just a report, so we'll move on to the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're on item number 27 on our regular agenda. This particular item, you've requested our board to bring this to you every month, which we're doing today, as well as answer a few questions that you had from our last special board meeting. So we've worked with Byron, our interim planning director, as well as the consultants on that. So we, again, have Byron here to discuss that with your board.
Thank you. On May 18th, the Board and Planning Commission met jointly in a workshop meeting to review the existing draft of the Comprehensive General Plan Update document. With the assistance of EMC consulting staff and county staff, the two bodies, 10 members, reviewed the goals and policies of the draft and offered comments and requests where deemed necessary. This input was collected for possible incorporation into the draft plan and review under an environmental impact report. Staff is requesting that the board direct staff to accept the changes made and proceed with the preparation of the EIR. So what we brought back is the changes that we presented to you at that meeting. Let's confirm that these changes are what you want to see, and then authorize staff to then take the next step, which is the environmental document. With regard to the numbers, there was an issue over whether what population numbers we should be using. This process began with the board directing us to use the 2008 numbers, the 94,000, I believe. To change that at this point would completely derail the general plan process. I just want to let the board know that the numbers that the board directed us to use at the beginning of the process, we very much want to stay with those numbers, because that is what all the work leading up to this point has been based on. So to change that direction, to change the population projections now, would severely impact the budget and timeline in the matter of hundreds of thousands of dollars in years to make any changes now. So I wanted that to be out front. We've agendized it to have that discussion if necessary. At this point, staff recommends that the board direct staff to accept the EMC planning group's proposed changes to the draft general plan. Accept the workshops resolving of Landover requests for inclusion of the draft general plan update, review and accept EMC planning's mapping updates, and authorize EMC planning group and county staff to begin preparation of a recirculated EIR and draft general plan update. I'm going to turn it over to Michael and Ashley now with EMC, and they're going to walk you through the changes.
Mr. Chairman, before if Byron could answer a couple of questions about the 94,000. I just want to make if I can.
Sure.
Thank you. Because it's not a requirement that this county needs to grow to 94,000 by year 2035. It's a be market conditions and supply and demand probably, and other economic factors that would move that way. So if we were using the 2012 number, 81,000, how significant is that number really anyway with this entire process? Or do we expect to grow to 94,000, which is doubling?
There's just projections. We can't predict. What we do want to do is what we're doing now is planning for that, and if we don't get to that number, there's no there's still nothing wrong with the general plan. If we surpass that number, there's nothing wrong with the general plan. You have to start with what number that you start with, and that's the one we started with, and we don't want to change that number. But if we started this process today, it might be a different number.
Right, and because that's kind of how I'm looking at it. It's just kind of a number, and it doesn't really. I looked through this again. There was no. I don't think there's 94,000 in the plan anywhere.
I don't know if it's referenced in here, but it's a lot of the studies in the background, and I'll let EMC speak to that. But it's the background information, the things that aren't necessarily written in the document, but the background information that the environmental work is based on has a lot more influence over, the numbers have influence over that.
Right, because I certainly, personally, I don't like the 94,000 number. I think that's too many people. Sometimes I think 55,000 is too many people, but I'm just an old guy here. But and I don't think it's relevant as far as you have to have that number for a sustainable, thriving community one way or the other. But I just want that clarified. So thank you.
Good morning, board members. My name is Michael Groves. I'm the president of EMC Planning Group. We'll get started. Ashley Hefner is with EMC Planning Group, is also here. We're supporting Byron in assisting in updating the general plan. We had, as was mentioned by Byron, a workshop with the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. We do have some handouts, and so we'll start with that because that's going to help us guide you through this next 30 minutes or so in terms of the process. So there's some handouts for the board, and there's also handouts for the public.
Mr. Chair, you can move that easel and put it over in the lobby. To change it.
So do you want to do,
So let's start with what's on the screen. And essentially what we're going to be asking you to do today is we started at that Planning Commission board workshop walking through the general plan document with a series of edits to that document, underline, strike through type edits. At the end of that meeting, you accepted those edits. We went back to the office and accepted those into the document itself. So you won't see any more of those edits because they were that previous version. So the first step in the process is just to acknowledge that we made those changes to the document per the direction of the board at the March 19th workshop. The next piece of the puzzle was that the board directed us to come back to you with various potential changes. These had to do with quality of life policies. There was a request for that, some changes with regard to some of the maps, wine corridor and some other things, the clarification of the nodes for commercial and industrial. So I'm just kind of going through some of the higher points that the board had asked us to do. So what we'll do is go through each one of those pieces with you to show you what changes we have made, and then we'll ask you for the same process as we did at the Board Planning Commission workshop, is to acknowledge those and allow us to go forward with those, or accept those, if you will, to allow us to go forward with those in the general plan. if you remember, what we're trying to do is get the general plan to a fixed point. So once it's a fixed point, then it can have environmental analysis done on that, quote, project description. It becomes the project description. So that is our goal with that process. So, and then beyond that, we have also, at the last workshop, we had landowner requests. And we had a series of those landowner requests. We went through those generally and said most of those landowner requests were dealt with in some form or another. We have a list of those today. We want you to see those. We want the public to see those to make sure everybody understands what has been dealt with and what hasn't been dealt with, and then have the board accept that so that we can move forward, so there will be no more landowner requests after today. So that's the process we're going to go through. So the first thing I'd like to look at is, and you have a packet in front of you, or will have a packet that has to do with a summary of additional quality of life policies. And the audience should also have that packet. It's all together. The one the audience has is stapled all together. The one the board has is in separate pieces or chunks so that we can deal with one of these one at a time. So the board asked us to do some additional quality of life policies. I had suggested to the board that we're currently working on an economic development element for another community, and we had done some quality of life assessment in that community. Although we didn't have budget to do this, we went ahead and spent some time and energy creating some quality of life attributes, is what we called them, quality of life attributes for the economic development element. And if you take a look at this, and we won't spend a ton of time on it, it's pretty straightforward. If you take a look at it, there is a goal, ED8, to improve access for all residents to a variety of high-quality, well-activated parks, green space, et cetera. And then there's a policy, increase park and open space and connections, park and recreation maintenance and establishment. Pretty straightforward things with regard to quality of life. A lot of it already relates to other portions of the general plan, where we talk about parks and open space in the general plan. That's a normal component.
Michael, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure. You were giving me that look.
In our AIT on our page 344, you have additional recommended policies, and it's a health and safety element. Are we coming back to that, or are we skipping over it?
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll come back. Okay,
Yeah,
because I had a
sure.
couple questions about it.
Yeah.
And you,
I'll hit
this
that.
is down below this. I wanted to make sure we would come back to it.
Well,
Okay,
I'll hit
then that's
that
fine.
next.
Okay.
Thank you. So, and then we moved a policy from the natural resources section into the EDE because it had to do with park financing and maintenance, which is a big issue, and it really seemed more appropriate in the EDE section of the document. There's a policy about walking distance. There's a how to improve health of the community residents, reducing health inequities, health and wellness programs, and these are becoming more and more popular types of policies and direction for boards and city councils in their communities. The health and quality of life policies could be an entire element by themselves. You could end up with a 15 to 20 page document just on that alone, maybe a 40-page document, depending on where you are and what community it is. I tried to synthesize this down into a couple of pages. So it's fairly short and sweet, but it hits some key elements with regard to health of the community, and it has to do a lot to do with parks and food and access to health services and access to healthy food options and those types of things, including reducing hunger and community safety, which are also big issues with regard to quality of life. If you have access to food and you have access to situations where there's more options and choices, and I know that's something the board has been very interested in, and you have community safety where safety is not an issue, then people want to move to the community, and people want to be in the community and stay in the community. So it's not only those people that move in, but it's also having your kids stay because there's a job here and they like the community and it's safe and, you know, they're loved here. So that's part of the whole process. And there's a lot of things that affect that, and lots of times we don't think about those things that are on the fringes that affect that. So that's what that is about. It's pretty short and sweet, but it is to the point of some of those issues. Any questions with regard to that? And if not, I'll move to the health and safety piece. Okay, health and safety element, we added a couple of policies, fire life safety protection and fire life safety protection coordination. So you had a question about that. Mr. Chairman, did you have a question about that?
No, my question has to do with, go back up there. You had, well, it's a health and safety element. You mentioned county dam inspections and vehicle emission reductions.
Yeah, that's, okay. Yeah, there's another policy with regard to that. We can get to that. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it had to do with the health and safety element policies that we added for quality of life.
The title on this page was health and safety element, so.
Got it. Okay. I'll get to it in just a minute.
All right. Okay.
So fire and life safety protection, fire and life safety protection coordination, a couple of new policies we added for health and safety element that have to do with quality of life. All right. With regard, if no questions there, can we move on?
Looks like we're good.
And then the next handout has to do with the commercial and industrial nodes. There was a lot of confusion, I think, by the public, and particularly the board expressed a lot of confusion about the commercial nodes. Although you expressed a lot of enthusiasm about having these nodes, there's been a lot of confusion about how they've been defined, what do they mean, and those types of things. So we tried to connect the dots for you and for the public, and in terms of connecting the dots, what you'll see in this handout is a dot connection between the glossary, which defines what is a centralized commercial node and what is a centralized industrial node, to the land use element, and to the land use element table 3, which defines commercial neighborhood, commercial thoroughfare, commercial regional, and industrial light. So you have a definition in the glossary. You have a definition of what the land use description is in table 3.1. You have policy in the land use element that describes them as new commercial nodes with the concept of both what is a node and then what's a vision for that node. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And then you have a map that is this first map that you'll look at, and the public can look at, that actually has the nodes on it. And in those nodes, you have 4 different designations. You have industrial light, which is the purple crosshatch. You have neighborhood commercial, regional commercial, and thoroughfare commercial. So the regional commercial is along Highway 101 with the red dots. The thoroughfare commercial is along Shore Road and along Highway San Felipe Road, excuse me, and along Highway 25. And the neighborhood commercial is locations like the corner of 25 and Fairview and in Piscinas, and that's the neighborhood designation. So what we've tried to do is not only tell you where they are and locate them, but define them a little bit more. So let's go back a little bit to the policy. New commercial nodes, and it basically says the county shall encourage new commercial regional nodes to be located at or near existing future highway interchanges, major intersections along existing and future transit facilities. The county shall also encourage additional access to new regional commercial centers through bicycle and pedestrian connections from residential uses as appropriate to the context. Figure 3.5 shows the locations. Table 3.1 describes the land use designations, and Appendix A glossary defines commercialized or centralized commercial node development. Then we've added a policy that says the county shall encourage developers to reflect a cohesive vision for node development in site plans submitted as a part of applications discretionary approval that recognizes the importance of the county's scenic resources and local character and the quality of life. The concept there is that we don't necessarily want to see those nodes, somebody to plop a gas station on a corner. I think what you want to do is have some kind of a vision for that corner. And the idea would be, this is very generic in nature in terms of the policy, but it encourages that if somebody walks in as an applicant, that they come up with a vision for the entire corner, not just, I'm going to plop a gas station on the corner. Gas station is great. Maybe we need gas in that location. Maybe that's part of it. But there's a lot of ways to visualize how that development will occur so that you don't end up detracting business from the county because somebody drives in and goes, wow, that's an ugly corner. So you want it to be attractive and you want to attract business to the community. So that's the concept. So maybe, Ashley, you could talk just a little bit about the nodes in terms of what you got down to in terms of definition. Ashley did a lot of research with regard to what does a node mean, and maybe there's a way to explain that briefly to the board.
Michael, two things. I think Supervisor Patello has a question, and some point we'll need a logical break so that we can have field questions from the public.
Sure.
Okay. Supervisor Patello?
I'm happy you're talking about this because, you know, we all want to see a little bit more revenue generation out of our thoroughfares. And commercial regional and a commercial thoroughfare, you know, I was trying to reconcile what the difference was. You know, a couple of years back, I don't know if a few of the supervisors were on the board with me at the time, but out there on 101, we had an application that called for a motorcycle racetrack. And, you know, in that area, it almost made little sense. Next door, though, was an RV park. And that certainly would have disrupted their peace and enjoyment and value of their property. By moving, do we still have those type of restrictions available to us to protect or, you know, put in businesses that are reasonably compatible with each other if we go to this type of zoning? And also, one other question, it's just a little dot on the map, but along the 101 corridor, there's quite a bit of property that goes beyond that one little dot. Is that an expansion or of the whole area? As that using that area as an example?
Sure. So yeah, there are restrictions inherent in each land use description. So if you look at Table 3.1, it provides general guidelines on what type of development is allowed with each land use description, whereas the commercial neighborhood focuses on encouraging a focus on local business and destination retailers or restaurants, so it does have that smaller scope. Also allows for mixed use that could include residential and retail and office uses. And then when you get down to commercial regional, you'll see that it intends to accommodate the key intersections along 101 and other major state routes. And it includes larger scale commercial uses like shopping centers and truck and automobile stations that are inherent in those larger regional nodes.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that guideline.
Okay, thank you.
And then what I would say about protecting and compatibility, I think that's a good question. A lot of that compatibility comes out in not only your coding, how you end up taking the general plan to a code, so what things are allowed and then what things are allowed with a use permit, and then what things are not allowed. So that use permit stage is where if you have something that's noisy or something that's going to be obtrusive or something, you probably want to have it in the use permit category instead of just the permitted category. That way you can review it and say, is it compatible with an RV park, for example, in that case.
As long as we can maintain that hammer.
Yeah, and then in some cases you will want to, and we put this policy in, you'll want to see a vision plan. So I want to see a vision plan, and that vision is how is this commercial node going to develop over time? Even though you might be putting in a gas station tomorrow, and that's who you have in hand with some kind of a lease or agreement with, I want to see what's going to develop around the gas. What is your concept? Is it going to be a full center, or is it going to be a small center, a large center? How much? Some of the properties that in your node analysis, some of the properties we looked at in and around the intersections, as Ashley described at the last meeting, where you might have a parcel that's attached to the corner, but it might be 40 acres and it might be a long, narrow parcel that runs down along a highway. So, do you want that whole thing to develop in commercial? Is it going to end up being a big, long strip commercial center? Those are choices that you have to make in terms of it. So Ashley's already also looked at what are the reasonable distances from a corner that you would develop. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, yeah, so the way that we addressed that issue was in the definitions in the glossary, if you look at the first page. So, for example, a commercial node development is a strategically located concentration of development and or a combination thereof located at or within a reasonable distance from existing and future intersections. So it provides that flexibility for a plan to come in and be evaluated if it is within a reasonable scope that that plan would propose.
Right. For example, so if somebody, say on that long 40-acre parcel came in and said, well, we want to do a new Casa de Fruta there. And that made sense because it was recreation, it was shops, it was RV park, it was planned as a vision for that whole, it might make total sense. If somebody said, well, I want to put a gas station on the corner, but I might want to put another, 7-Eleven store down here at the other end of that parcel, which probably wouldn't happen, but just assume it for a minute, that might not be something that you envision as being a good go-forward plan. So we want to give you the flexibility, but also the regulation to make sure that there's a vision that helps your community from an economic development standpoint. People do not like to drive down the highways and see badly planned or designed commercial as they're driving in because it takes away from the aesthetic of the community, which is what is attracting them here to start with. All right. Any questions with regard to that?
Well, on the map in the back, some changes do need to take place on just the spelling. We want to make sure that our streets are identified correctly, like San Felipe is F-E and not F-I. The San Benito Historic Park is actually the San Benito County Historical Park, down below on the southern end.
Mm-hmm.
Bellotto, you have San Benito County Golf Club. We have no such thing. We have the Bellotto Golf and Country Club. And I'm not sure the exact name, but you do want to make sure that you look that up and get that correct. So other than that.
Well, actually, Supervisor Barris, also, you're inconsistent with identifying the northern part of Route 156 in your different maps. You sometimes identify it as 152, and sometimes you identify it as 156.
Okay.
So the 152 runs in the kind of southern part of Santa Clara County,
right.
And then 156 ends at the Y. So anything below that Y is 156, but sometimes you identify it as 156, sometimes you identify it as 152.
Anything below the Y at in Santa Clara County.
Yeah, so
at the
basically
top.
Casa de Fruta.
Right.
Anything below that Y is 156.
Right. Got it. Okay. We'll correct that. Those are easy. And that's sometimes, we have a GIS graphics person, so he's just putting the best he can. So we'll go back and make sure. I'm glad you hit those points. Okay, the next piece. Any other?
Actually,
Sure.
Can you explain the difference to me between center and the word you're using now, no? Why are you switching the words on?
There was it's a good question, and it was a debate that we had, and Ashley can probably answer it better than I can, but I'll start it. And that is that we had a big dilemma with the fact that the city-centered growth issue and having centers, downtown centers, and then all of a sudden you're talking about a center out on Highway 25 someplace or someplace. So what we're trying to do is make the distinction between shopping centers or center of town, downtown type centers versus nodes where you're getting some kind of a vision for an intersection, a four-way intersection. Is that about as close as we can get?
Yeah.
Okay. The next piece, if you have any questions on that, the next piece is
Health and safety.
yeah, the health and safety. Okay, so on the health and safety, we had two new policies that we were suggesting be added. They were in the 2013 draft EIR, and there was a lot of, as you know, a lot of mitigations in the draft EIR that were suggested to be policies. We are holding back on most of those because we want to make sure we go through the analysis of the EIR before we've determined what should be come back to you as policy and not. And I think that's a wise decision. There was a couple that we thought were pretty straightforward and felt like the county should have in the plan going forward as a part of the baseline. So, and it's up to you whether you want these in or don't want them in. And so the first one is HS 2.10, county dam inspections, perform regular inspections and maintenance on county-owned and operated dams and reservoirs to reduce the risk of dam failure.
Okay, and the problem with that is I do not believe the county owns any dams.
Well, that was one of my questions to you about it. And if you don't, then we can take that out. It was actually a mitigation in your EIR.
Okay.
So we transferred it over, and we wanted to raise it with the board now. If you don't own any dams, then it's not an issue we need to deal with going forward.
Okay. And what scared me with this language is that down the road somebody would then sit there and say, okay, we need to inspect privately owned stock pond dams. And then instead of having our ranchers upset with us because we want to eliminate their cattle, they're going to be upset with us because we want to eliminate their stock ponds.
Right. Well, and not only that, the potential that somebody could interpret it as liability to the county because you didn't do inspections and you said you were going to in the general plan. So that's fine. That's why we're bringing it to you, to raise the issue. So that will go away. And then the next one is HS 510, vehicle emission reductions. The county shall study alternatives for improving circulation when feasible to reduce idling motor vehicle emissions. It's a big issue in the state of California in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's a pretty harmless policy because it's really a requirement for you to look at that wherever you can. It's up to you.
I'd like to ask Byron, if Byron is still here, if there would be issue with that, leaving it in there, as far as planning and...
Okay, and my suggestion, what I had written down here, that we add the words such as roundabouts. Because even discussing this with Matt and Ray yesterday, they were saying, well, we're going to require Public Works to turn their vehicles off when they come to a stop, you know, as opposed to letting them idle for 5 minutes. So I think the intent is that we're not trying to, or you know, tell people that they have to turn their vehicles off and they can't idle them for a few minutes, but we want to deal with planning such as roundabouts, as opposed to bringing people to a four-way lighted intersection and everybody's got a red light for whatever reason. You know, and we deal with, we create traffic circulation. So I would want to sit there and see either add such as roundabouts added to this language, or something to the effect that is talking about traffic circulation, improving traffic circulation.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, when we look at individual projects at the Planning Commission, we already are looking at ways to improve circulation and reduce idling sometimes as a noise issue more than a emissions issue. So I don't, having this language in here, again, they're guidelines and they don't necessarily translate into specific ordinances that then are requirements of every project.
Then I'm okay with it, Mr. Chair. I don't know that I want to be as specific as stating the roundabouts because it talks about improving circulation, and roundabouts is only one method. I think there may be others, but...
And again, my suggestion there was to, when people are looking at this down the road, and we might be gone, is that they know our intent, that our intent was traffic circulation and in decreasing idling involving traffic circulation, as opposed to saying we want people to turn their vehicles off the minute they come to a stop.
Got it.
You know.
So what we could do is we could add the word traffic circulation and in parentheses put EG, which means just an example.
Exactly.
We could give a couple examples behind it in parentheses, and then people are on track that it's a circulation issue. It's not like we want the public works guys to shut their cars off when they get to the intersection, because the county's going to be saving emissions. So
Right, that sounds,
I get it. Okay?
Yeah.
We'll take care of that.
Okay.
Okay, the next subject area is the wine and hospitality priority area. And
Actually, Michael, do we need a break and let the public comment on what, or do you have another better place to?
yeah, I think there's a better place to take a break right after this subject. We have really two more things that I want to do. Well, actually, 1, 2, 3. So well, let's do this hospitality.
Okay.
And then we can go. Then we can do landowner requests. I'd like to do hospitality and the new community study areas, and then the landowner requests. We can do the break right before landowner requests, and then we can answer any questions with regard to population.
Okay.
So the new community, the wine hospitality priority area, we have a handout for you with regard to that. In the previous general plan version that you had, the hospitality area or priority area was kind of a glob on a map, circles on a map. We promised you we would do some new mapping of that to try to create a little more preciseness in terms of not where it was located, but just so you could see it. And then probably the biggest thing that we decided to do was change the direction from the last general plan where it talked about an overlay zone, that the county, when they do their zoning ordinance, should come up with an overlay zone for that area. And we changed that to a combining district. Your current code has combining districts in it, and I was having a hard time understanding how an overlay district would work, because the overlay district typically overshadows the underlying district, whereas a combining district allows you to do both. So if you have a piece of agricultural land and you're wanting to do something that has to do with hospitality or the wine industry, you can have those things because you're in a combining district, and the combined district allows you all those uses. For example, an overlay district might say, in this overlay district, you can do wine, right? You can do the wine industry. Well, what does that mean? Does it mean you can plant grapes? Well, what if you want to plant grapes and have a winery? What if you want to, do all your processing there? Does that allow a processing facility? Does it allow you to have a bed and breakfast along with your winery? Does it allow you to have a restaurant with your winery? It doesn't speak to any of that. So we scratched the overlay concept and came up with a combining district, which is consistent with your existing code anyway. And in that combining district, we can say, if you have a piece of ag land that sits here, you've got a combining district, though it's both designated ag and it's designated hospitality. And so if you want to come in for the hospitality, under that, you're allowed to plant vineyards, you're allowed to process wine, you're allowed to do this. You need a use permit if you want to have a restaurant, or you need a use permit if you want to maybe process the wine. You can make those calls when you do your zoning code. But it gives you some discretion about how that will work in the district. So we've created that in this. We've replaced the overlay with the combining because we think it's much more feasible and practical as an implementing tool.
or we're paying you the big dollars.
Yeah. And then there's a glossary. We've added some definitions in the glossary for what a district means and what a combining district means. And then
And those are the definitions from the zoning code. So it's
standard, yeah, so it's straightforward. And then you have some new maps, and for the public's use, there's one map that basically has just got the purple dotted line around it that shows where is the wine hospitality priority area. And then a second map, which we promised we'd do for you, which basically shows all of the wineries and locations of the wineries. And Ashley's done a great job of breaking this down into wineries with tasting, wine tasting by appointment, vineyards only. So it actually is more of a economic development map that you're adding to the general plan, but it helps both the Chamber of Commerce and others to promote business within the county of San Benito. So any questions with regard to that?
Just again in the spelling, the DeRose Winery instead of DeRosa, so that needs to be changed. And of course, you know, all your maps will have to be changed as far as the country club, the county golf, San Benito County Golf, and,
Sure.
and San Felipe River. Okay?
Yeah, and if you catch anything else, please let us
I
know.
will, thank you.
Because we've got to have more eyes on the ball than just us. So, all right. And then new community study areas. I wanted to talk about that for a minute before we take a break. And sure.
It's a summary handout on land use map revisions, and then you had a large county map underneath that. It's our page 361.
Is it in the larger packet, or?
Yes, I guess that's what.
Go ahead, what's the question?
Okay, you have different colors for different designation of county land, and it looks like you've named the BLM land as park land. It's the same color as the Pinnacle National Park. It's the same color as Hollister Hills. And I think that's giving a wrong condemnation that this BLM land is open to the public. We have the issue with Clear Creek being closed. A lot of this land that you're showing as green parkland is landlocked and just open to whatever cattleman has the grazing rights to it. If we can kind of come up with a different color for the BLM land and the same as park would probably
So, yeah.
Well, so it is currently designated park in the existing general plan, and it is, I mean, I guess maybe an alternative to redesignating it some other classification, we could add a note saying that it's not publicly accessible parkland, or some indication that it differs from the state parks that are accessible.
Yeah, I know you have the issue going on with them, and my understanding is they're making it accessible, but you have to get a permit, and it costs you, costs you money and takes however many days to get it.
Yeah, but a lot of this land, or a fair amount of this BLM land, it will never be accessible to the public because it's landlocked, and cattlemen lease it to run cattle on it, and it's not really ever.
Yeah, so well, let us come up with a different designation. I think it's a good suggestion. Why don't we come up with something that's
because it kind of shows, if someone was to look at it, oh wow, San Benito County's got all this parkland. Well, we really don't.
Yeah, and it is an issue. So, so we will come up with something with regard to that. BLM owns land all over the United States, and so there's different designations depending on what the use factor is for it. So we can play with that a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we were going to take a break, but I wanted to talk about new community study areas just for a moment. There was a little bit of debate back and forth at the last Planning Commission Board of Supervisors workshop about too much information, not enough information with regard to the description of the new community study areas. We started off in the existing general plan that was brought before you by the previous firm with a very small paragraph or so on what they were. We heard the board ask for additional information about why were these new community study areas selected, was really the point of it. We took it beyond that point and added a bunch of existing information about those new community study areas, just kind of existing concepts of everything from what's the soils and topography to, what uses exist there, et cetera. And upon reflection, and the board raised this as a question at the last workshop and said, we're not sure that that's what we want, that it may be too much information. And so we reflected on it and felt that that was a good direction that you gave us, and we pared it back some, taking out some of the existing information. We got concerned that if we're providing more information about the new community study areas than you would on a normal land use designation, then that's not an appropriate dot to dot, if you will. So what we felt like is that it could cause some CEQA issues, that we would we're studying these to too great of a length because we're describing them more than we're describing a normal residential designation. So just to keep it simple, we pared it back. It still contains most of the same type of information. We pared it back into a very succinct manner. So if you look at your board packet for general plan revisions, we have got basically a revised new community study area description, and it's not anything you haven't seen before. It's just pared back from what it was. So I just wanted to share that with you. We felt like that is an appropriate way to go, and it was a good discussion that we've had with the board and the Planning Commission through the process. So any questions with regard to that?
I guess, yeah, as everyone knows, I'm not overly enthused about those designations, but then in the document, it does state that other areas would be considered and weighted the same regardless, and so was that new language, was that put in? It's hard to remember everything that we're doing, but what is the differential between the community study areas and other projects that may be considered based on the merits of the development?
I think the basics are that the GPAC came up with some reasoning for identifying these particular areas, and I think that through that process, the board accepted those areas. In the end of the day, it just does a basic description of these areas. Even the lines that describe those areas are flexible. They're not boundaries. They're flexible, lines that are showing a general area in which the GPAC, the Planning Commission, and the board so far have thought these might be good areas for you to grow as a community, as a county. Mm-hmm. Remember, in the end of the day, that those areas are going to be required to do a specific plan. They're going to do their own entire planning document, their own environmental review on whatever that planning document tells them as a project description, have a set of mitigations and conditions on it as a project. That doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't come in a different location in the county and ask to do the same thing. And so that flexibility is in the plan.
Okay.
And it states it as such.
Mm-hmm.
I read it, yeah.
Any other questions? So when we come back from break, then what I'd like to do is hit the landowner requests, and then there's a few things I want to say about the document in general, and then there was some questions you had with regard to population and some of those. So I'm happy to do that. I'm not opposed to powering through, but if we need to take a break, that's fine.
Okay, well, are you on a time constraint?
I am, but I could be here. I know you guys are going to want to take lunch, but I have to be gone before you take lunch.
You have to be gone before, so you need to get all the way through?
I do.
Okay, so let's take questions from the public at this point on everything that we've covered so far.
Chairman Munzer and Board, Scott Fuller from San Juan Oaks. Bill Wiseman from Kimley Horn couldn't be here today, and he represents the Lico family, and Mrs. Lico had to leave, so they asked me to ask a question, which I'm going to do. And I know you haven't gotten to landowner request, but I'm going to ask it now so it can be addressed when you do. On the landowner request, there isn't the other Lico property, Michael, the residential mixed one. Should that be on this list, or is that a separate kind of category?
I can answer that quickly.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yes, this southern property, the southern Lico property, is not on the list because it wasn't a landowner request included with the information that planning staff had provided to us, but that property has been incorporated in the board's approved alternative, designating it as residential mixed.
Thank you very much. And then a couple other things. Bellotto is Bellotto Park Golf Club. So you want to check that probably, but that, I'm pretty sure that's the name. Bellotto Park Golf Club. And then on the wine overlay, the combining district versus the overlay zone, as one of the ones involved in proposing that, I just want to mention, we proposed that just with the idea that it would, the overlay zone would give the message to people from within the county and outside the county that this is kind of a use you want to encourage. And it wasn't just wineries, it's winery and hospitality, so it may want to change the name a little bit. But also, as long as the combining district will eventually allow the same kind of leeway that an overlay zone would for that kind of use, I think that's fine. But maybe that could just be clarified by Michael, too, that the combining district provides the same kind of flexibility once you get to the zoning, that you can encourage and allow wineries and other hospitality type uses to come into those areas with less grief, if you will, in the planning process to show that you're encouraging that. So I'm not familiar enough with combining versus overlay to know that, but you probably can do that, but I just want to make sure that would be true. Okay, thank you.
Board members, Michael Groves, just to answer that question, the name of the section is called Wine Hospitality Priority Area, so it does include both. And our feeling is that the combining district will actually provide more flexibility and more encouragement by landowners to use their property for promoting the wine industry and the hospitality industry.
Okay. Anyone else from the public have any questions or comments at this point? Seeing none, I guess we'll move forward.
Are we going to lunch?
Okay, back to the microphone. Michael Groves, Ashley Hefner for the board. The next section that we want to discuss is the landowner requests. And what's on the board behind you essentially are the landowner requests that we have looked at and dealt with in some form or another. You have a handout that has a table that says owner's name on the left, requested change that was made, and then captured in previous general plan update, Board of Supervisors directed changes to map, and basically what we've done with it. Maybe you don't have a handout yet.
You don't, but it's also in the PowerPoint in the board packet.
So I'm going to ask, while we're doing this, I'm going to ask Ashley just to quickly go through each one of these and just make a quick statement about that we've handled this or not handled it so that you know and the public knows what has gone on with the general plan. And the concept here is that once we accept this as being appropriate, then we can move forward and not have to deal with any more landowner requests.
So the first 3 landowner requests that you see, the Bray, Color, Brigantino, and Campisi, were all captured in the board's approval of the alternative that included the residential urban or residential mixed area south of the city of Hollister. So all of those were incorporated in that area, which is in that area north of Ridgemark. The Lico Garico property is the one that is north of the city of Hollister at the intersection of 156 and east of San Felipe. And both of those were captured in the nodes that are there on your land use diagram. The Lima and Lumpa properties were also incorporated in the board's approval of the residential urban designation in the alternative from May of 2012, I believe. The Medina Jimenez is the northmost commercial regional node on 101, and this would be one of those circumstances where the definition flexibility allows for parcels that may not be specifically in that node on the map to be within a reasonable area because they're just south of that node indicator. The Noble request is, you can most clearly see that in the figure 3.2 and 3.3, the blow-up of the Tres Pinos census designated place. It's just south of the State Route 25 and Quinsabe Road intersection, which was also approved in the board's alternative in May of 2012. Multiple requests at the intersection of 156 and San Felipe. That's also a node capturing that intersection and areas within a reasonable distance. Now, the only two requests that were not captured were instances where the requested change in designation was not abutting an existing approval or an existing designation where it would reasonably make sense to change those designations with what was already approved. And I don't have the visual in front of me, but I believe the ends is, here it's off of South Union Road, and there's also an area where the request was for a change to a mineral resource area at their location south of Lime Kiln Road, which is actually a combining district in the zoning code. It's not a land use designation. And the other request was for rural transitional or residential rural, and this area is located just east of the Union Road and 156 intersection that's surrounded by existing agricultural designations. So that was not included.
So those are the designations that we have accomplished as a part of this process. And Ashley's done a lot of research in the minutes, and as we said at the last meeting, and gone through each one of these individually. So we feel pretty comfortable with where we are with it. We just want to make sure the board feels comfortable in terms of handling the landowner requests appropriately and that there's nothing that we've missed.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You go ahead.
Okay. So looking at where we've changed things, but the last two, the ends and intravilia, it's not be changed.
Not going to be changed.
Okay. Because I think what we ended up doing with the ends property is it has a constraint already as far as a cluster building, and there's a easement or conservation restriction. Did you look into some of that? And these other changes is pretty much compatible with the adjacent land uses and going forward?
Right. I think all of the land use, all of the designations as you're talking about, they were all fit in. They were compatible except for those last two. We felt like, for example, the last one, I remember reviewing specifically, and that whole rural transitional area is Union Road and 156, and there's a lot of larger home residentials up in there, but they're all on ag land. They're all on ag designations. So if you change this property to some rural residential or rural mix or something else, you're going to have to really rezone that whole area, it looked like to me. So it was just taking on a whole nother level that may be better done at a later time. If they want a general plan amendment and go after it from that perspective, that's how I would approach it instead of doing it in the general plan.
Right.
Because it would have a multiplier effect on numerous other properties.
Okay.
It wasn't only this one.
So then my question, that leads up to my question, on Union Road in 156, that dot, I can't really read it from the map. Is that, does that fall under commercial thoroughfare?
Yes, it does.
But that's not the Intravia property that because you
No,
just
it's
mentioned
not.
Union and 156.
It's east of Union and 156.
East of, okay,
Yeah, it's just a little bit in and a little bit north of that intersection.
Okay, so I got
It's just kind of out in the middle.
one and the same. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And a key point I just want to make is that the owner requests that were captured were all already incorporated in previous board approvals.
And
And these two were not.
And they were not. And the ones that we did capture were not reflected on your maps. They were not reflected in the general plan. So we went back through and attempted, I would say we, Ashley went back through and did all of the research of all the minutes and looked back through every one of these to document, to make sure that the board had taken some action at some point in time to give direction, and they just weren't captured. So I think we've done a really good job of capturing a lot of the concerns you had in the audience before, where there was landowner requests and they weren't being dealt with, or not maybe dealt with appropriately. So we feel like we're at that point now where we're really comfortable with it. Okay. On the main board packet, which is basically I have a packet. I don't know what you have anymore because you guys are doing individual packets and I'm doing the bigger packet. But we have a main board packet that basically is all of the changes we just talked about. It's got hospitality, it's got the reduced new community study areas, it's got all of the different things we just talked about. There's nothing much more in here to review that you haven't already reviewed in these individual packets, other than things that you had requested at the last meeting, where we might have a diagram or something in here, or a photograph, and the date is wrong, or the name was wrong, or something of that nature. So I don't want to waste your time going back through this packet. I want to let you know that there is really nothing in here of substance other than making a change on a photograph, the description of a photograph, or a date on something. We had some things that were said 2030 instead of 35, and some of those things that you had pointed out. Go ahead.
A couple more, Mr. Chair. Michael, on page 357, there's mention of are established for buildings. I'm assuming you mean buildings?
We did catch that.
Okay, good.
Apologies.
And I thought, well, maybe I'm not an architect, I'm not, so maybe buildings do exist. Okay, and then on page 385, it should be future development instead of just future develop. And that's the last change that I would recommend.
Okay, so 385.
385.
So what were the two pages again?
357, you caught that one already.
Okay, and
385 under LU 8.9. And it just, on the last sentence, it just talks about protect farmland and focus future develop away instead of future development.
Got it.
So, okay.
Was there something else? No, okay. So with that said, you had some questions with regard to population. If there's nothing else that the board would like to deal with, what I'm going to request at the end of this is that you go back to the original request, which is accepting all of the above. So basically, the general plan revisions from the last workshop, the direction that you gave us from that workshop to put in, which is now in strike-through underline, the added recommendations for health and safety policies, and the direction on the mapping revisions and the landowner requests. It's capturing all of that and having the board acknowledge that and say, go forward with that. We're fixing it in place. We're not making any changes from here on out, and we are directing you to start the revisions to the EIR. That's the request we want from you. You can either do that now, or you can wait until after we talk about population. I don't really want to mix the two per se, even though they do have impact on each other.
Mr. Chair, I would rather do it now. I was ready to make a motion to accept the staff recommendation in regards to the general plan update and the changes that have been presented.
Okay, so you're making that in a motion?
That's a motion.
Okay.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay. We have a first and second. Oh, wait, actually, we probably need to do public comment on that.
And I need to amend my motion to
Okay.
reflect the
All right.
recommended changes.
Let's scratch the
I
motion.
will drop
and
my
Let's
motion.
go public comment.
Oh, don't worry about it.
We're
We're good.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so we're going public comment now on what we just went over.
I'm Marty Richmond from Hollister. I'll be brief. Obviously, from Mike's statement about having to capture some of these things that were in the minutes that were not captured, we got a hole in the system somewhere. So I hope you put an action item somehow to make sure that in the future, when the board makes changes, that somehow they do get captured somewhere, that they get ported over to the GIS as something so that someone can pick it up and doesn't have to go through the minutes all the time to see what got done. So normally, if this was my old military outfit, we'd get an action officer up here and we'd say, that's your job, fix that. Thank you.
Jason Noble, 855 Bellata Road, Trespinos. Thank you for this. My only concern is that the lands that lie within the Trespinos Sewer and Water District are zoned R1, and the designation that you've placed on us would be rural residential. In order for it to be feasible and mutually beneficial for us and the Water District to pursue, was that an oversight, or is that something that could be corrected?
So if you do look at the, I think it's figure 3.3, the census designated places, you can see the clearest version of that area. And it was based on the board's, that same alternative approval that designated the southern portion of land south of the city of Hollister as residential rural and not residential urban. So that was the previous direction, but if that is a change that the board would like to see, then it certainly is at your discretion. It is contiguous to other residential mixed designations, so it would not be totally, spot zoning or spot designating. So,
Okay, maybe a question to Jason, Mr. Chairman. So you're concerned about the area of RR being but it's within the Trespinos Water District service.
Currently, we're in the sphere of influence.
Pardon me?
Currently, we're in the sphere of influence.
In the sphere of influence.
Yes.
Okay, so all right, that makes sense. So and you're not looking at having it expanded outside of that sphere of influence as far as the change from R to RR.
Right. We would ask to be on the same footing as they would as R1.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm just waiting to see if there's anybody else that has questions. So,
Okay, is there any other questions or comments from the public at this point? Okay, seeing none.
So on that point, Mr. Chairman, board members, again, it's your discretion. The previous board direction was for rural residential. It is, if you look at the map, and I know you can't see it from here, but it's a small map. We have the 3 maps on a page, and it's the last map on the bottom. It's got a little yellow finger at the bottom of the map.
What page is that?
Right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I see.
Right.
That makes sense, R1.
I got it.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
What page is that?
That's figure 3.3.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you've got the wrong one.
Michael, the
This
dotted
is the one
line
you want to have.
is the Trespinos sphere of influence?
And then go to the fourth page.
Or is that the census?
No. Actually, that's the,
Is that the census designation?
correct.
yeah, that's the,
And help me, what's the density difference between R1 and RR?
So RR is, I believe, up to 2, and residential mixed is up to 20 units per acre. I think that's right.
that's right, too. And I think one of the issues is the issue that, I don't know that Jason's saying this or not saying this, but I don't want to put words in his mouth, but one of the issues is the need for upgrading water and sewer systems, and in order to do that, you have to have enough density in order to push that. And so I don't know if that's his point or not, but that's what I glean out of it, that underlying all of this, in order to be compatible and get the services that are necessary in that area upgraded, you need to have enough units to pay for it. So that, I understand where it's coming from, and I also understand you made a previous direction. So if you want to change that direction, we're open to that concept.
What will that direction, let me ask this question. Yeah, what will that direction, if we change the direction, what are we looking at as far as cost, time? And I need to ask Byron if that is, are we setting a precedence here where we could have changed others and didn't, and may have an issue with that?
Well, you can make whatever direction you want to make. You know, the changes that were made to the maps were always based on previous board direction, not based on individual requests. Right. But previous board direction also sometimes came out of individual requests, right, whether they be at the GPAC or the Planning Commission or the board level. So, you know, if in your mind, to be consistent with what you think your direction was in the past, and that is higher density in that location, then I don't think that creates an issue with other properties.
Okay. And then my first question to Michael is, are we looking at an additional cost to?
I'll have the contract amendment to you this afternoon.
Good thing I asked.
We're not in this afternoon. Wait a minute. You couldn't stay till this afternoon to finish this up and have a lunch break.
That's right, I forgot about that.
How can you have a contract amendment?
You got me. All right, so I think both Ashley and I feel like that, having that designation go to that makes a lot of sense because it's for the core of that community. If it wasn't in the core of that community or adding to the core of that community, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. We think it makes sense. We think that we can do the designation, and we don't think it'll have a major cost effect on what we're doing in terms of the process.
Okay. And then I guess my question, on I think it was the Intavia project, you said that if we made the changes for that, it was going to have ramification within the area. You don't see the ramifications here in...
Yeah, two different ball games.
Okay. Then I can support it, Mr. Chair.
So it's to go to R1 then?
Is that the consensus of the board? Are we going, I heard Ashley say something about residential mix.
Residential mixed would be the designation.
So RM.
RM.
Okay. All right, I'm good.
See, to me, I would be looking at Sunny Slope Water District rather than going the other way, but...
But they still would have to make application.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
All right, I'd like to get to the forecast numbers. I think we've lost some of our people that were going to speak on it, and we have a couple others that have been patiently waiting in the back to discuss this. Can we go to, are we ready to go to?
Yeah, I was just going to go out in the restroom and change into my flak jacket before we started this conversation, so.
We can't, so you can't either.
Mr. Chair, can we go back to the motion?
That's right, I'm sorry.
So that we don't mix these two together, and unless
No,
the
you're right,
public
I
has,
forgot.
are we done with the public? Okay. Then I'll go back and make my motion per staff recommendation regarding the accepting the proposed changes with the additional changes that have been recommended here today.
That includes the RM.
Yes, including that.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes 4-0.
Thank you, board members. And so this next conversation, the board and county staff have asked us to discuss a little bit with regard to the population estimates and how they affect the county and how they might affect the general plan. Byron's already made a statement with regard to that effect. There is a handout that we will give to you that basically gives you some background around population estimates. And let me just take off from the beginning of that handout. Do they have the handout? Everybody's got it? Great. The county uses population estimates, which is a reasonable forecast for the purposes of CEQA in numerous planning documents, and relies on those estimates to determine the near-term capital improvement programs, transportation funding, et cetera. And then that is related or relayed to the COG and to AMBAG. And you can see the little pretty diagram we have here, and that little pretty diagram is basically saying to you that you as the Board of Supervisors have the legal right to dictate whatever population density you would like in your general plan, and the AMBAG Sustainable Community Strategy and their Metropolitan Transit work and this COGS work, it follows that input. So you are the leaders in the community to set what you'd like for your community. That happens in every community, whether it's a city or a county, to set the tone for what they like. You as a board in 2008 took the 94,000 population estimate that was estimated at that time. You've since then done your 2035 housing element, your general plan background report, and your general plan alternatives report. So you have set a trail for yourself of documenting using that population figure to go forward with. So whether you like the population or don't, want to grow to it or don't, you've used that population figure. The general plan does not contain today a population figure. It did at one point have that number in it, and you asked as a board to take it out. But you weren't asking to take it out because you didn't like it. It just felt like we didn't want to set a population number in thing. But we still have to have a population number to write the environmental document, because the environmental document is going to be based on a population figure for growth in the community. So is it better or worse to have 94 versus 81? It's really better to have 94 because it means you're going to analyze impacts that are greater and potentially have mitigations that mitigate those impacts. So you're being more conservative, is how I would put it, in terms of your environmental analysis by having a higher population.
Okay, if I could stop you right there, and Mr. Chairman, thank you. And that's fine, but now do we have to use that same number to do when we figure our traffic impact fee number? And that's what scares me, is that we, are we diluting that, or there's a big differential between, 81,000 is going to impact our roads, where need improvements to our roads and so forth. But if the actual population growth is 81,000, but our impact fees are set at 94, we don't have enough money to move a project and construct it. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
So can we use 81 for the our traffic impact fee and still study the environmental work that needs to be done at 94 for our general plan?
Well, the answer is yes. And it's a complicated question that you're asking, right? So the answer is yes, you could do two different numbers. But remember, this board, when the economic downturn occurred, this board, like every other city council and every other board in the state of California for the most part, wheeled back their TIF numbers. They basically said, we want to charge less fees because we want to attract people to the community and continue to attract development if we could. So we want to wheel back those fees. Well, part of that wheeling back those fees, you were taking out certain improvements out of that program. I would encourage you to look at your circulation element and be fully cognizant of the improvements that are in there and have that TIF fee match that. You have to have a funding source for what's in your circulation element. And so how that's married up, whether it's 81,000 or 94,000, is a call that you'll need to make in terms of how those improvements will get done, how much they'll cost, and what kind of fee nexus you'll need to pay for those. So that's part of the answer to the question. I think if you look at this thing, there's some really relevant pieces on here that should hopefully make you feel a little more comfortable about this discussion that you're having about population. Population estimates to be used by COG should be originated from the county's general plan.
Where
And
are
it says
you
right
reading?
on
I'm
top.
sorry, I lost you.
On your handout, I'm on number 4.
Thank you.
By law, it says, by law, the
Okay, got it.
population estimate to be used by the COG should be originated from the county's general plan, not AMBAG, as noted in the California Transportation Commission. I've said that this county's got it a little turned around. And you've got it turned around in the sense that COG and AMBAG are now driving your decision-making versus you driving the decision-making. Probably if the general plan had been completed in the time frame that you expected, that wouldn't have happened. But it is happening, and you need to take the bull by the horns, I think, and turn that back around again. AMBAG should not be driving your population projections or your plans for growth, whether it be land use or circulation. That's your call. By law, it's your call. So we're trying to be really clear with you about this and put some of it in writing so you have a context to it. This comes from California Transportation Commission guidelines. It said it is very important that the RTP be consistent with other plans prepared by local agencies, incorporate or consult with local agencies, and it specifically calls out the general plan, especially the circulation and housing elements. Sustainable community strategy, which is also a requirement to be prepared by AMBAG by law, is required under Government Code Section 65080 to utilize the most recent planning assumptions considering local general plans. And this goes on to say, pursuant to Government Code Section 65080, does not regulate the land use or the use of land. That means the sustainable community strategies prepared by AMBAG does not regulate the use of land and does not supersede the land use authority of cities, counties within the region. City and county land use policies and regulations, including general plans, are not required to be consistent with the RTP or the SCS, the Sustainable Community Strategy. In developing the Sustainable Community Strategy, the metropolitan organization, being the AMBAG, shall consult with cities and counties about their existing general plans and foreseeable changes to their general plans over a period covered by the RTP. So Byron had a concern in the discussion as we were having a discussion as colleagues, that the concern he had is, well, we have an existing general plan, but we don't have a general plan that's adopted yet. This, under the law, basically says that they need to take into consideration both existing general plan, which is your adopted general plan, and any foreseeable changes to that general plan over the period of the RTP. So it's very clear that you're the captain of the ship, I guess is the best way to put it. And that doesn't mean you can just, do whatever you want, but there's an idea of coordinating here with these agencies, but the coordination needs to come from the direction from the board and what you want for your planning functions going forward, land use, circulation, et cetera. We also have some other citations in here with regard to that, and you can utilize it and come to me with questions if you'd like. On the traffic planning, it is essential to plan for transportation improvements adequate to support the planned growth of the county. So I said this earlier, and I think it's a really important point, is that once you settle on a circulation element and we do the environmental impact report on that, it's important that the improvements in that get transferred over to your capital improvement program over time. It needs to be incorporated in your TIF. That's why San Benito County General Plan Policy C14 links the land use and circulation elements by requiring funding be in place to support infrastructure resulting from development. So you have a requirement to have a funding mechanism. It's pretty straightforward. It's required. But if an improvement project is not listed as constrained, funded project in the COGS RTP, it is not eligible for statewide transportation improvement program funds. That's a big deal. That means that unless projects are included in the RTP, you will not be able to receive any state funds or plan or build these improvements unless it's built with local funds. So that's really where you have to look at your relationship with COG and developing the RTP, and your relationship with AMBAG and developing that, is you can drive the numbers and you can drive what the improvements are, but you also have to work with them to get it into their regional plans so that you can get funding for those improvements from the state. And it's probably not going to be full funding, as you know, it's going to be matching funding. So you still have to have your funding source locally. Questions? Other things that either Ray or Matthew would like us to cover?
You know, one thing, Michael, we talked about that you might want to give the board, I know Byron alluded to it already in the beginning, but what would the cost be, what would the delay be if the board were now to decide it wanted to change its population under either adopting the AMBAG 2012 projections or any other number?
We think it's a major impact. And thanks for asking that question. I know it was something I was supposed to cover and just kind of went here. We think it's going to be a major impact. We think we're talking about really starting the environmental documentation from scratch. And so that means you're doing new traffic analysis, new air quality analysis, new GHG analysis, et cetera. And so we think we're at $500,000 to plus. And we set $500,000 to $1 million, but that's a big range, but it's $500,000 plus at least to start over in terms of the environmental documentation.
And a year or more for...
Yeah, time frame, it's probably a year to 2 years, I would say, added on.
Supervisor Patel?
Okay, Michael, you've done a real bang-up job with our general plan. We've accomplished more in the last 6 months probably than we did in 5 years, and this thing's been going on longer than that. Now, how, you know, I'm interested in hearing from the AMBAG executive director in a few minutes, I hope. You know, it says here, MPO shall consult with cities and counties about their existing general plans, foreseeable changes of their general plan over a period covered by the RTP. Really, is it fair to expect them to kind of pick up where, in a process that we've had to put into the MPO plan? You know, because we're so lagging far behind. This should have been done a couple of years ago. There should have been no debate. They could have used the 94,000, seen our community special study areas and so forth. Now, I just don't want to jeopardize any of our transportation dollars with some sort of misinterpretation where we're at.
I don't disagree with you at all, and I think that it's a very well said that you don't want to jeopardize your transportation dollars, and I can't emphasize enough that you need to communicate and coordinate with both AMBAG and the COG. What I'm suggesting is that the board take leadership in terms of how they're going to go about doing that. You know, the issue with regard, are they expected to follow suit in terms of what you're doing in terms of your planning? Yes, of course. And do they always do that? Not necessarily, because it's sometimes there's a timing issue involved and sometimes there's politics involved. So in this particular case, there's timing issues. You're behind of what your projection was to do this general plan. Because it lagged behind, AMBAG's through another cycle of what they're projecting in terms of their growth and on to their sustainable community strategy. But, and I'll leave it to the AMBAG director to talk about that timing, but at some point in time, you'll catch up, because if you do your plan based on what you think your growth patterns are, what you'd like to see in terms of population, what you'd like to see in terms of circulation, they will be revising their plans in the next 5 years, and you'll get fit into that pattern of their regional planning. I think one of the concerns I have, particularly for San Benito County, is that we have a regional planning, look at the entire county. And a lot of times, even in the traffic modeling and some other things, the things are not calibrated for San Benito County as well as maybe they are for more metropolitan areas. And so what happens is you get miscues of how much impact there is on Highway 25 or how much impact there is on Highway 101. So, we feel strongly that you should use all the tools in your toolbox, whether it be the AMBAG model or some other model, should look at everything to make sure that you get it right. So that when you do your TIF fees and you're looking at how you're going to collect funds from people to pay for these improvements, you're on target with that, with an error category that's not necessarily out of the ballpark, and that you have a margin for error in there, but it's a margin in error that's a smaller margin error than I've seen in some of the analysis that I've looked at. So we think, as a part of our process, and you hired us to do this, is we're going back and looking at the transportation section in the EIR. We're going to critique that. We've hired a consultant to look at it, critique the modeling, and re-look at it, and we'll rewrite whatever we need to rewrite to get it correct. What I want to bring to you is something that's on target and tells you what you need to plan for the future in terms of both roadways and funding for those roadways.
Yeah, because we, besides some of the major bridge projects that we have, public transit, I do agree we have to look at 25 again if we're going to have any further growth in this county, and also probably Union Road. You could expand Highway 156 to 4 lanes, but you're still back up Union Road clear to the river if we have any growth at all on the south side of Hollister. And, there's a lot of areas that we need to improve, but the last thing we need to do is lose dollars and lose time on moving the projects that we have on the books right now. With that said, with the general plan where we're at right now, I think we should be pretty confident we should finish it this year. I don't know of any other major development project that is submitted an application other than just a couple of hundred homes, I guess. Are we that far behind that we just don't catch that next cycle with AMBAG or some sort of amendment halfway through their this RTP or their MPO plan, and just catch a couple years down the line?
Well, I think you are going to have to catch it a couple years down the line. I think you're going to have to finish your general plan and drive that and then have those conversations. But I think I would start those conversations today. And I know you've had some of those conversations, but I would encourage you to start those conversations today about where you're going, where you'd like to be, and continue to have those conversations with Caltrans as well about what you're expecting. Highway 25 is a tough highway to talk about in this county. I stood in front of the FORA board and the Board of Supervisors in Monterey County in 1993 and told them if they wanted to encourage growth in their community, if they really wanted to bring jobs to the community, they need to fix Highway 156. It's the bottleneck in Monterey County. And now we're here, how many years later? 20 years later, and it's the bottleneck in Monterey County. And they didn't want to hear it at the time because it was too big of a ticket item. But it was a lot smaller of a ticket item in 1993 than it is in 2013. So at some point you got to bite the bullet and say, these are what we want to do in our community and make those decisions. So I think we can come up with reasonable planning forecasts for Highway 25 to do improvements on 25 that are not going to take it out of I know everybody's looked at it as, it's such a huge thing to bite off that we'll never get there. Well, I think there's ways to solve that. And I want to encourage you to look at ways to solve that with AMBAG and with the COG and with us as we go through this process. And if we help you do things after the general plan, we can help with some of those things, maybe in terms of how you move them forward in ordinance. But I would encourage you to look at your fees as a part of start that process in terms of how you're going to look at your fees based on your expectations for the general plan circulation.
And I think we are.
Okay?
Michael, I want to, our general plan can have the 94 number. COGS RTP can have the 81,000, correct?
Correct.
They don't have to be consistent.
They do
they don't
not.
have to be the same. They'll catch up to each other at some point.
Correct.
Okay. All right, because I don't think AMBAG is driving our numbers. They're not dictating to us what our general plan numbers have to be. They've never said that. And so we can continue forward with the 94,000. You could do your EIR work, your traffic circulation numbers with the lower number on the RTP, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. With that, I think I would like to have Marna Tooney come up, the Executive Director of AMBAG, and speak to this.
And I think the question is whether the general plan number for population has to match the number in the MTP SCS. And I am not an attorney, and I would recommend you consult with County Counsel, of course, because this is a legal question. Now, that being said, SB 375 is very clear, and I quote, "Nothing in SB 375 shall require a city's or county's land use policies and regulations, including a general plan, to be consistent with the regional transportation plan." So we can use the number we have, and you can use the number you have, and move forward.
Thank you. Any questions? Supervisor Patel?
Yeah, I asked, Mike, and, I read a paragraph here about the MPO AMBAG consulting with the cities and counties on existing general plans. And I went to your office, and, you've, I think, very clearly and understandably explained how you came up with the population projection and why. And it made a lot of sense to me. It really did. And as far as the Department of Finance number being 74,000, you added on just because there probably will be some additional growth pressure in our community. But it does say here that to their general plans, which we're operating under our old general plan,
That's correct.
and also that maybe if we're doing some changes, you would take that into account. And we are in the process of changing our general plan. How much emphasis does the study take into account of where we're at with our prospective general plan?
We consulted with the county in many meetings and with the other jurisdictions in the region. And we understood that you were in the process of revising your general plan. And that's why we looked at that. And that is, why our number is quite a bit higher than the Department of Finance number. We are at the end of our MTP SCS process. We're set to adopt soon. Almost immediately after that, we will be looking to start the forecast process again, and we will be consulting again with the counties and the jurisdictions for the next number, because now we have to update our plan every 4 years. So we will start work on the forecast, within the next 6 months to a year.
Okay. And is there any point between now and 5 years from now, when we go through this process all over again, to amend whatever projection or projects or where we're at as far as growth in this county?
Well, the MTP SCS process is now a 4-year cycle process. Under SB 375, AMBAG elected in 2009 to go to the 4-year cycle so that they could have an 8-year RENA process. That was a formal election they made. So it's a 4-year cycle for the adoption of the next MTP SCS. So in order to have a new MTP SCS 4 years from now, we'll have to start working on the next forecast like I said, within the next 6 months to a year. So if you adopt your new general plan in that timeframe, we will definitely be looking at that as part of that analysis for that next forecast.
Yeah, I kind of want to remind the public that we've made a lot of progress with our general plan, but we haven't even done the environmental work yet. And, you know, how much, you know, emphasis can we expect the MPO to, you know, whatever designations we're laying out without having that, at least that portion of it done. And so I could see where AMBAG would have taken to 81,000, and especially with the growth rate in the state and the region, the state is, many areas are losing population. We're still in a growth area, but I don't think the growth is as much as people think it is. Thanks.
Other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nothing?
Thank you, Mar.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We don't have anybody here from Caltrans, do we? Or do we?
No. No.
Because my questions have been answered as far as does it matter if the numbers are different, but I think, and it doesn't sound like it does, but what does matter to me is that we should be the driving force for the numbers that are being used, and we're not.
No, we are.
Well,
We are.
it's
For the-
well, I think that what's confusing, and I'll read it again, it is very important that the RTP, which is our Regional Transportation Plan, right, be consistent with other plans prepared by local, state, federal agencies. This consistency will ensure that no conflicts would impact future transportation projects. But because they're not consistent at this point, are we going to have our future transportation projects go away? Are they not going to be funded? And that's where Caltrans would come in and answer my question. Is it? Are they?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You want to handle
Well,
it?
okay, at the last COG meeting, Caltrans was present. The director for District 5 was present. He gave a report. At the end of his report, I asked him, point blank, if COG was to continue down the road of using numbers other than AMBAGs in their RTP, would that put us at risk of losing would that put our funding dollars at risk? His answer was yes.
Even though it should not, because we should be able to use whatever numbers we feel are
But it has
adopted
to,
for
it
our...
has to be from a recognized, I think that's the word I want, planning agency. And AMBAG is a federally recognized planning agency for the region.
So then it matters not what the county has adopted or what COG has adopted. That is not a recognized, those numbers are not recognized federally, is what you're saying. Even though AMBEC should be adopting what
But when this,
local plan...
when AMBAG developed their numbers, COG was on board, and COG recognized the numbers and voted on the numbers that AMBAG came up with. It's only recently that there was a movement afoot to change those numbers a year, more than a year, after AMBAG worked with everybody to come up with the forecast number.
So AMBAG did not drop the ball as far as communicating with our regional...
Absolutely not.
Our regional...
And unfortunately, COG apparently could not stay longer. They're, Lisa and
Let's just, Mr. Chairman, if I could help too. Let's just imagine we're starting the general plan in 2010. We would be using 81,000 as the population number. We wouldn't be using the 94,000 to begin with. And, you know, that's how far we're out of sync with these plans. And I'll contend that 81,000 is the right number with just the number of projects we have: Del Webb, Santana Ranch, Fairview Corners, and whatever is happening here in Hollister. But, you know, studying the 94, keeping that as the direction does make sense for our general plan. And then in 5 years from now, or 4 years from now, that's be the number that the MPO is use, AMBAG's use. And so all we're doing by not going with the model today and the AMBAG model is risking our transportation dollars. That's the only outcome. There's no other outcome but to lose the money. And if we, what's the reward for maybe you know, going through what COG suggested? Absolutely nothing. There's nothing we gain. All we do is probably lose the money. And that's why you know, we keep going direction we're going. 94,000 is the baseline of the environmental work that we're due. We'll have to look into how we're going to do our impact fees and have the right projects and the improvement plans for traffic circulation. But it's absolutely not true that AMBAG or Caltrans is directing our growth. We directed the growth. It's just what we have on the books right now. That's what we're trying to go forward. Okay?
Mr. Chair.
Representative Cruz?
Thank you. Michael, by going through the EIR process at that 94,000, there's going to be a point in the future in which AMBAG's going to have to do something about those numbers, because what I'm looking at is how we're going to find the funding mechanism for projects, say, for example, Highway 25, which, the Supervisor Bertolo and myself, we both agree that we took it off that list to stimulate the economy, and today's are different now, and I believe, and I don't know how Supervisor Bertolo believes, but I believe Highway 25 needs to be placed back on the list. We got to start funding somehow, somewhere. You said it perfectly. So for us to move forward on the 94 and then having the traffic impact at the 81,000, at what point do we reach that funding capacity? Is that where AMBAG comes into play and says, okay, we need to look at these numbers in 2 years? Or is it something that COG's going to have to say, we need to revisit these numbers in 2 years to ensure that the general plan is being funded the way it's supposed to be funded?
Yeah, I think the numbers will need to be revisited as soon as the general plan is adopted, and I think AMBAG and COG will both look at those numbers and see how they play in. I think what's really important here is